That's how it's gonna be, a little test tube.
It's most likely to be a highly infectious virus.
Guy steps out of Times Square station, smashes it on the sidewalk.
Welcome to the Zero Indent Review, a show dedicated to handcrafted studies of genre fiction. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined as always by Patrick from A Method to the Madness, an older boy following the Prophet, really interested in what the internet was.
I mean, first of all, I definitely didn't just wake up 20 minutes ago.
For sure.
But you know, if I was one of those children, it's interesting to hear the internet from that perspective. I definitely would be curious about it.
Exactly, and I definitely didn't wake up. Darth was 30 minutes early today. Anyway, we're joined once again by Darth, a man pretending to be Homeland Security at the end of the world.
Yeah, that guy had it together. He got his women and skipped town.
Dude, the second that reveal happened, I was like, Darth is like, that's what I would do. What's morally incorrect about this guy?
He was just trying to help them. I mean, he had a plan.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, welcome back to our continued study of post-apocalypse stories, brought to you by the Zero Indent Patreon subscribers who help make the shows and articles that shape Zero Indent. We are once again continuing our coverage of Station 11, one of the best TV shows, in my humble opinion. We are talking about episodes 5 and 6 today. Before we get stuck in, I'm assuming that the vibes are high once again. We like these episodes,
yes.
Is my assumption. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think I think the second episode we're talking about today might be my favorite so far.
Interesting. I liked episode 5 better. It might be my favorite episode so far.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Some reason the tension in that one was hitting more, like the general panic about I forget what you called it, as the process of the apocalypse happening.
Right, the collapse.
The collapse. Yeah, that it's such a good collapse, story. Just the panic, the selfishness of everyone. It really it really, I don't know, clears up the Prophet's motivations, I feel. Even though he does go crazy, obviously. Like, it's... Yeah, I can see what you meant last episode when you said there were going to be, like, big reveals happening. Definitely was.
And I just want to give you your flowers before we hear about Darth's thoughts, Pat. You made a joke in our last recording session. You were like, oh, the Prophet's bloody, it's probably Tyler. I mean, you called your shot.
Yeah. Was that... Tyler is the son, right?
Yeah. And last episode you were doing a little bit where you were like, oh, like, wouldn't it be funny if, like, the Prophet was Tyler? And the Prophet is Tyler.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was conveying that in the last episode. That's why I said it. Like, I thought it wasn't. Yeah, I thought it wasn't speculation. I thought the show actually did convey that. Yeah.
I think it's trying to take you there. I don't know that. I don't know that until you get the match cut at the end of the first episode we're talking about. I don't know that the show makes it explicit until that moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, true.
And then obviously in the next episode, he literally talks about his dad. So, like, I don't know. I think at that point you're like, oh, like, if you miss what that crosscut is doing somehow, if, like, you don't understand the Kuleshov effect and you can't put one and one together, then the next episode when he's like, my dad, Arthur Leander, I think at that point you're supposed to hopefully put it together.
Well, I like that it match cuts from his front to the back of his head. It's like a nice symmetry.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Filmmaking. Darth, good episodes, good TV. What are we saying?
Yeah, I'm right there with Pat that I enjoyed 5 a lot more, specifically because it's the portion of the collapse that so frequently gets skipped over, and the portion, maybe it's just because I'm like so OCD and I love seeing how things get organized. And so I'm like, I want to see how does the museum organize? How do they get who's in charge, and how did they get to that point? And so that's mostly, even though a lot of it did get skipped over, they talk about having plenty of food, but we don't really see how, et cetera, et cetera. So they, glance over the information is there, but we don't really see a lot of it. But it's the closest that I've gotten in a whole lot of these kind of shows, where it normally just skips to way post and you don't see the collapse at all. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. And, yeah, six I also liked, but at the same time, I was also very aggressively like, Kirsten, just like, kill the kids. You can do this. You got it.
Oh God. Okay.
I know.
We're gonna have a fun chat later about moral relativism, I think.
Right?
Jesus.
Right?
That you land on kill the kids immediately is interesting. Liz,
Okay. I'm going to quote David McNeil here. Because you have said on stream, normally I don't advocate killing kids, but I advocate killing this kid.
Yes, because that fucking Mandalorian kid needs to go. He needs to go, okay? He needs to be done with. I'm not having a bar of it, okay? Get rid of him. In the bin. Just knock it off. Zero Indent, as a company, doesn't endorse child murder. Except under specific circumstances. And, that's not something I thought I would be saying today. When I woke up this morning and I went, I'll make myself a cup of coffee, I'll have a shower, get ready for the podcast. I didn't anticipate having to say that. But you've put us here, Darth. In the first 10 minutes, I have to say that this company does not endorse killing kids, except under two circumstances. One, they're incredibly annoying. And then two, if they're trying to kill you. I think that's acceptable to me. I think that's like a fine thing to say. So I'm going to move on before I say anything that's particularly incriminating.
If anything, you're respecting the kids, respecting them as people that can kill you.
I'm treating Pat, this is such a good point. I'm treating them with the same respect that I would treat any adult. And isn't that, a mature thing to do and a mature way to behave? I think so, probably. After you're 10, you're basically a person, right? Anyway, let's move on. Because I don't want to keep talking about kids. I want to very quickly, before we get into it, and move us on very quickly from our conversation, Patrick Sommerville, who is the showrunner and one of the main writers on this show, also did The Leftovers, which I've been watching just quietly in the background because I like this show, and I was like, if he's done other stuff, I'll watch it. It's very fun. It's got, and this sounds really sexist, but I was going to say, who is Jack Antonoff's wife, which is a really shitty way to try and get to Margaret Qualley. But Margaret Qualley's on that show. She's fantastic. It's a good TV show. Anyway, Patrick Sommerville, one of the things about this show that's interesting is they started making it and then COVID happened. And so they're making the show during the pandemic. And so this is from an interview with Patrick Sommerville. And the interview is titled Patrick Sommerville on the Life Imitating Art World of Station 11 and Finding His Kirstens in Mackenzie Davis and Matilda Lawyer. It was written up by Tyler Doster. And so this is the question about what it was like to make this show during the pandemic, which isn't something we've really talked about because I'm not necessarily sure it's germane to the ideas and the themes we've been addressing. But I think given that the first episode is about the collapse, I thought this was a good opportunity to bring some of Sommerville's actual words into the conversation. So I'm just going to give you this block quote from him responding to the question of how did you guys go making this show about a super killer flu while there was a super killer flu happening? He says, quote, well, really fucking weird. I mean, hard not to pretend that wasn't true because it went from an intellectual exercise to the world we're living in as we were telling the story. So I felt a little bit like the story we were telling had more agency than stories usually do. It felt like our story was alive. But also, it's hard to say this in the right way. We never wanted to tell a story about a virus. We wanted to tell a story about people after a bad thing happened. And so it was instructive and weird and scary, sure. But we also just kept telling the story we wanted to tell, which was after the thing, not during the thing. We skipped that on purpose. We skipped the first 100 days, except for inside of that little apartment, because we wanted to get to the rebuild after. I think one reason why the show landed so well is it's a lot about the work that hasn't been done emotionally, about that shitty thing that happened. And even 20 years later, people still haven't dug into it because that sucks. You don't want to do that. And I think now we're all faced with the same thing. We are collectively traumatized, I think, by the last 3 years of life. I think some people have looked that right in the eye from the start. Some people have looked at it and asked, and some people have gone, no, like that. And some people know that they owe that work, and it's not time yet because it's too hard. I hope that Station 11, all those different kinds of people, exists as a friendly, warm, and compassionate story that can be helpful depending on whenever a viewer feels like it is time they want to watch it. And it's also very fun. I think it doesn't take itself too seriously, or if it does, it makes fun of itself immediately afterwards in the right way. And it's just very accessible. So I hope it's always there for people, whatever timeline they want to watch it. End quote. What a charming guy. just like a nice
very
dude.
wholesome.
Because like something that I've been seeing lately with people who are trying to hire and trying to work with the younger generation who were kind of, you know, going through their adolescence and everything and those like pivotal years during COVID, and now they don't communicate the same way especially like in the workplace, because they were traumatized by that event, and now they're like so worried about how they interact with people because they didn't learn how to interact with people, if that makes sense. And you're seeing like so much of that in the show as well, that now that you said that, I can go and I can tie that back to how people are saying that like when they hire this new person, and like this new person will not answer any question unless they ask AI first. And they, you know, people were thinking this is incompetence. And then, you know, eventually with like more studies or whatever, they were like, no, it's just they're worried about communicating. They don't know how to communicate. So they're asking the computer, how do I communicate with people? And the theory is that this is all a result of COVID and missing out on those learning years, right? And so you could take all the stuff with like the Undersea and everything and make some interesting comparisons that the author, I'm sure, never intended, but here we are.
Yeah, all COVID kids are fucked up psychopaths is what you're saying. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Another disclaimer. Time for another disclaimer.
This just makes me think of my favorite Blue Sky post, which I'm just gonna read it to you in the tone of voice, which is, "Oh, poor baby," and there's like a bunch of like sad faces littered throughout this. So read it with that tone. It goes, "Oh, poor baby. Do you need the robot to make you pictures? Yeah. Do you need the Bobot to write your essay too? Oh, you can't do it? You're a moron? Do you need ChatGPT to fuck your wife?"
Yeah, that's a millennial wrote that. It's the condescending tone of a millennial.
Yeah, that's me being like,
Zero Indent does not endorse.
Oh, you can't write your own book.
Do not endorse robosexual relationships. You got to put that disclaimer up there.
Can't write your own book? Aw, little baby. Anyway, learn yourself is what we're saying. Here we go. Patrick, could we please hear the summary for Station 11, Episode 5, The Severn City Airport, directed by Lucy Chanak and written by Cord Jefferson, also one of the main staff writers on the Watchmen TV show. So, do what you will with that information.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay. I can see the tonal crossover.
Yeah.
The day of the collapse, Clarke boards a flight to Arthur's funeral, where he runs into Arthur's ex-wife Elizabeth and her son Tyler. The flight is diverted to Severn City. A second plane arrives, full of sick passengers, and the passengers aboard are entombed, unable to leave. The first weeks of the end pass by, shrouded in pain and terror. Passengers break down, and Elizabeth still believes a plane is coming to save her. Clarke learns that a Homeland Security officer is a fraud, just as he takes the female soccer team with him on a doomed errand. Elizabeth, Miles, and Clarke find themselves as de facto leaders of the community after a small stunt requiring the small lie. On day 12, Elizabeth gives Tyler a copy of Station 11 for Christmas. Just after, Tyler witnesses a man climb from the doomed plane. He lets the man inside, and in a standoff, Miles shoots the man. Elizabeth and Tyler are quarantined for a month. On day 42, Elizabeth and Tyler are let out, proving the man was, in fact, not infected. On day 100, Clarke and Elizabeth finally have it out over Arthur. But Tyler overhears their argument just as Clarke decides Elizabeth and Tyler have to go. In the moments that follow, Tyler sets the plane on fire with himself on board, a deception that allows him to escape as we get a match cut, at last confirming Tyler is the prophet. Tyler remembers damage, then escape.
I think I'm just going to make it my life's mission in these summaries to make you read as much of Station 11, the comic book, as I can, Pat. And it's working so far. So, yeah. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on. This episode is very dense with... There's a lot done in this episode with like background detail and like things going on that aren't ever really doted on. I think especially from a characterization perspective initially with Clarke and Elizabeth, you know, when they're on the plane, right? The initial sequence we get is that Clarke's on the plane, and someone says, "Oh, like it's that actress from blah blah blah," and he's like, "Oh, I know her. We're friends." And he's like calling out to her, and she's ignoring him. Eventually, he goes up to first class, and has a chat with her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, like I saw you in the airport or whatever," and that it's such a characterization of both of them because from her perspective, she's like, "Well, of course I'm not going to go talk to Clarke. Like, you know, he was Arthur's best friend. He knew about all of Arthur's affairs while we were together, and he never told me." But then from Clarke's perspective, he doesn't know Elizabeth well enough to know that going up and talking to her is a mistake. There's a lot of, you know, positioning that the story is doing with that initial interaction, and the sort of antagonism they have or that she has toward him at least.
And I love, this is throughout the episode, but it starts immediately. Clarke's desperation to be someone, be important, you know, and that first manifests when the lady's like, "Oh, that's a famous actress," and then he tries to really casually be like, yeah, she's my friend, and he's like trying to get her attention, and then obviously the lady thinks he thinks he's crazy. He's like, "Oh yeah, he's a crazy fan thinks he's friends with the actress." But yeah, like and it's so interesting, like how you know, the characterization versus character evolves for Clarke throughout the episode about how he, you know, he's very insistent that like he did not want to trade places with Arthur. You know, he didn't want the fame of you know, shallow Hollywood films and, you know, the shallow people that are attached to that. But all of his behavior when he's not saying that kind of stuff points to the fact that he did want something like that. He wanted maybe a bit of a different lot in life, kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder with Clarke, and the show does some. This episode in particular, you know, he sort of at one point he does something. I can't remember which. I'm sure it'll come up in my notes when we get to it, but he does multiple things where he's sort of using his background as, they call him like a CEO whisperer. So he's like he's a corporate consultant, and anyone that works in the business world just spat on the sidewalk. He's a corporate consultant, which he universally hated, and fair enough. I used to work with a corporate consultant when I first started in software, and he came over for dinner one night, and I was cooking dinner because he was in town for some reason. He lived in Melbourne. He came over for dinner, and without taste, I can't remember what I cooked, but I cooked something. And without tasting it, he immediately seasoned it with salt and pepper. And I remember thinking, like, try it first. Like, I've cooked it, I seasoned this. Anyway, it just was one of the small things where I was like, fucking motherfuckers. Anyway, he's a business consultant, and he filters a lot of his decision making and his ability to control the situation through what he's learned in this corporate world. That's how he sort of justifies it to himself, or that's how he sort of produces this notion that he's in control, or these explanations for why things are happening. But actually, the reason why he's in charge and keeps getting away with shit is a combination of luck, and that, like, they lie. Like, that initial thing that gets them into authority is, like, based on a lie, which is, I guess, what Tyler ends up reacting to throughout. is his mistrust of Arthur based on this kind of foundational lie. And I think that a lot of Clarke's personality is also based on, like most people, right? Like all of us, there are these little small lies that he tells himself, like he was saying, Pat, I don't want this fame, like I want these other things. It's like, yeah, like of course you have to say that. That's how you cope with the fact that Arthur made it and you didn't, you know?
I think
Yeah.
potentially that his personality was that he loved being the what do you call it, the 2IC. He loved being in the shadow of the person who was famous, and after Arthur dies he doesn't have that anymore, and he keeps feeling obligated to like there were so many times throughout episode 5 where I kept expecting that he would go up and he would take charge, but he never did. And I'm wondering if it's because he didn't have that leader to follow. Like if Arthur was there and had taken charge, then he would have been like immediately behind him and it would have been helping, right? But part of like his arc was having to force himself into that role that he had never wanted, to be the main person instead of the backup. And all the stuff on the plane at the beginning where he's trying to pretend like he is somebody because he knows the actress and all this stuff kind of lends itself to that reading, I think.
Yeah, I also think that in not being the famous one, he gets to sit next to Arthur and feel superior because even though he's not famous, he's still a better person and he's a more interesting person and he's more real. Like there's something like, it's like the way that like everyone feels where they're like, well, you know, the people in charge are making all these shit decisions. Like I would make different decisions, but they're allowed to have that position because they're not in charge. And it's like the second that Clarke has to step into the limelight and be the one in charge, he has to start owning these decisions. And it ends up driving him to the point where he's like, I think that I have to kick out Elizabeth. He's threatened by a child. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a kind of short bow that you can draw between his sense of superiority with Arthur, his lack of action in informing Arthur's various wives and girlfriends about all the affairs he's having, and his behavior when he finally does become, you know, the guy with all the answers. And the guy with all the answers, the way he gets there is by lying, which is the same thing that, you know, ostensibly Arthur's doing with all of his affairs. So I'm someone has to write that essay about you know, his sense of superiority and insecurity. I think there's a really interesting paper in that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that conversation he has with Tyler at the very start where he's like, you know what happened to your dad, right? I can't remember what he says exactly, but he tries to give him some sage wisdom about being an adult or something, like, you know, accepting hard truths or whatever. And yeah,
Well,
you can
no
really
one
see
had told
how...
Tyler that his dad was dead. That was
Right.
the conversation.
Yeah, and then he's trying to make him feel better, and he says, you know, I can tell you're a smart kid. Like, you understand what happened to your dad. Like, I'm sorry. And then he kind of pauses and goes,
Civilization is a complex, self-correcting mechanism. As complex as a person, only self-aware to a degree. You understand.
but whatever happens, I'm your Uncle Clarke.
Yeah, so I feel like there's he's trying to sound smart, sound authoritative to this kid, you know, give this kid maybe like, you know, oh, I'm an anchor you can trust, you know, I'm very knowledgeable, I have a lot of wisdom. And also, you know, I'm on your side, you know, I'm your Uncle Clarke. And then all those things get shattered throughout the episode. You know, Tyler finds out that he's not truthful and he's not reliable. And like, you know, you can really see how that would get into someone's head.
Yeah, let me quickly set up the big broad strokes of like what happens, because this episode is a series of vignettes across, you know, the first sort of 130 days of the collapse. So basically, the airplane gets diverted. They are all stranded in the Severn City airport. We'll talk through the big plot beats, but basically it's Clarke Elizabeth and Tyler, as well as Miles, who was sort of the night janitor or something like that, or the security guard, beg your pardon. And there's a bunch of other people there that are sort of recurring cast members. There's like a series of factions in my head. There's civilians, there's the nuns, there's the girls football team, and then there's like the leaders, which is like Elizabeth, Miles, and Clarke, and they're all trapped, and they basically experience the end of the world together. Like you were saying, Pat, Clarke is having this conversation, and so we must have a very brief, yet again, Shakespeare theory hour, because Clarke says, "I'm your Uncle Clarke," and then we get the voiceover, which is an aside, that you think Clarke is saying to Tyler, but it's not. He's saying it while he's about to have a shot as he's drinking a beer. He says, "The worst I may be yet, the worst is not as long as we, not as," fucking Shakespeare. "The worst I may be yet, the worst is not as long as we can say." So, this is from King Lear, because of course it is, because the show refuses to not drop lines from Shakespeare in. And it's great filmmaking, because the line from the play itself, "And worse I may be yet, the worst is not so long as we can say, this is the worst," that's an aside in the play. So in the play, someone is having a conversation, then they turn to the audience and they say this line. And Clarke is having a conversation with Tyler, and then it match cuts to him saying this to us, the audience, ostensibly. And this line is pretty simple. It basically just means, if you can still say, this is the worst, it can always get worse, right? It's like, if you can still voice that as an idea, shit could always be worse. As long as you can say it's bad, it can always get worse. And obviously, King Lear is the play that Arthur performs in. You can, do your own work there to sort of figure out what Clarke is thinking, right? It's very subtextual in my mind. He's just been talking to Arthur's son, and then he quotes a line from King Lear that King Lear says that Arthur was performing when he died. Obviously Arthur's on his mind, and his feelings about Arthur are like central to this episode, right? We've already said it, but like, Elizabeth is one of Arthur's ex-wives. Tyler is Arthur's son. Arthur is this central figure to the story, and he's perpetually absent. And it's like his absence and the impression of him is this animating force behind this story in a really, in a way that I find really compelling, because the more that you learn about him through other people, the more that, like, I don't empathize with Arthur. Like, he does seem like he's kind of the worst, but like, he also just seems like he's kind of a mess, like all of us,
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, every character's relationship to Arthur is sort of like a fraught negative one. Arthur Arthur was in their lives, and he didn't make it necessarily worse or better, but he made it messy and complicated, and sort of like was messed up a lot of people's lives. And yeah, but like people can't stop thinking about him in this apocalypse setting. And I feel like that line from Shakespeare, if you can say this is the worst, then something can be worse. I feel like reading into that, it's like, if you're constantly surprised by a new setting that's worse than the last one, it's because you have a lack of consideration and a lack of imagination. You sort of just like, you're in the moment, not forward thinking kind of thing. You're not thinking too deeply about what's happening, and therefore you're always surprised that the next thing is worse. And I feel like that sort of parallels people's relationship with Arthur, in that they all think of Arthur this one way, but then he keeps coming back into their lives, posthumously in unexpected and complicated ways, and influencing the way they're behaving and the way they're feeling and thinking and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is like, and I said this before, but that is like a central thing in Mandel's work, right? She is intensely interested in the way that we are all kind of that we all exist in this perpetual process of dealing with everything that has happened to us and will happen to us, and that there is no real difference between someone being here and someone being gone, because they still have influence and they exert pressure and ideologies. And you know, this is the central ideological argument between Kirsten and the prophet at the end of the day, which is like, is it better to know what was, or is it better to wipe the slate clean? And, you know, obviously Kirsten's side of the argument is like survival is insufficient. And then from the prophet, we get, you know, basically the, the Kylo Ren argument. And yeah, like, is it better? Like, is your life better if you just forget about Arthur? Maybe. But like, is that even possible? Is that even something that can happen? And I guess we'll talk about it when we talk about the next episode, because I have a lot of really complicated thoughts about the prophet, and the insufficiency of the ideology that he begins to build, that I'm sure we'll get more of. Yeah. Arthur Leander, interesting character. I'm sure we'll get more of him.
I thought it was really interesting when you were giving the description that everything is based around the absence of that character. And I was, and everything you were talking about, I was like, you're describing The Force Awakens.
Yeah, dude.
You're describing Luke Skywalker right now. It was, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, but what if it was written well? You know, got him. Eat shit, J.J. Abrams. I'm just kidding. You seem like a nice guy.
Yeah, the story was bad. But anyway,
story not great. Story not great.
But no, there was something interesting I wanted to ask about. So in that scene where he's like, I'm your uncle, and I don't know if I like this or not, that they get around showing that Tyler is intelligent until later. They just overtly tell the audience, you are intelligent. And so that builds up our expectation of the prophet, assuming at this point, like Pat, you had already figured out that this was the same character, right? Like, you don't really get much intelligent from him until he's like downloading Wikipedia and he's doing all of this stuff with the other children, and you can see like some kind of like psychological game, not games, but he's doing some like manipulations and stuff to try to help them. But it's that is a sign of intelligence. But at the beginning, it's just the story telling you instead of showing you. And at first I was like, oh, I hate this. This isn't right. They shouldn't be doing that. That's the wrong way to do it. But then also, should they have done it? Was this the time to show him doing calculus or something to show his intelligence? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like they show his intelligence by him being mostly silent, and then when he finally does speak, he's quite articulate. I feel like that conveys a lot about like his intelligence, even as a kid.
I think the problem is the it's not a Game Boy, but whatever the pad is, and he's got the headset on, because so many kids who are plugged into that level is like the opposite of intelligence, if that makes sense, because they have to have that entertainment, which is not stimulating in a lot of senses, like a book would be. It would be entirely different if he had been like, reading a thick book every time that they said that, and like, oh, he's so smart, he's got his nose buried in a book. Like, that would have made so much more sense to me. But I'm just like, no, he's just like a kid playing Pokemon. What are you talking about? He's intelligent. Like,
I don't know, man. There's a lot of calculation involved. Does fire good against water? I mean, yes. First of all, kids really do be on their phones. No one is disagreeing with that. I think that it comes back to an idea that Rye often talks about, which is third-party confirmation, where it's Clarke saying to Tyler, I mean, you're a smart kid. Like, he's saying that to Tyler, which means that Clarke thinks that Tyler's a smart kid. And that's like that third-party confirmation where if another character is talking about... This is a bad sentence. Let me start again. If a character is talking about another character, it can be an efficient way to give us exposition while also telling us something about both characters. The fact that Clarke thinks of Tyler as a smart kid does not necessarily mean that Tyler is a smart kid. The fact that he thinks of him as smart, I think, is ostensibly why he ends up feeling threatened, right? He thinks of Tyler as this, like, kid who is, like, precocious and paying too much attention and manipulative. And I just, like, don't know if that's true. Like, genuinely, like, I'm just not sure if that's the case. You know, by the time he gets to that point where he's like, I think we need to get rid of them, Tyler does prove that he's quite canny in the stunt that he uses to escape ostensibly and fake his own death. But, like, I don't know how smart he actually is, or if that's just that's a resentment that Clarke is carrying because of the fact that this is Arthur's kid, and he has to find something to resent Arthur for in this kid. And, like, this kid is, like, the animus of whatever feelings he has left for Arthur, and he might be projecting some of that. I'm not sure. So I don't disagree, but I think it's a productive thing to think about, is, like, whether or not he actually is smart, or if this says more about Clarke and his relationship with Arthur than it does about Tyler himself, which is often the argument that Rye will make about third-party confirmation.
He's just a silent kid, so you just read into him more, you know, just project onto him what you think.
It is kind of that same thing we talked about with Kirsten, though, where it's like kids on TV are so much smarter than in real life.
Mm.
I was an idiot when I was
10. Yeah, you know. But, like, I was also thinking, like, I think, like, actually, this ties back into what you were saying at the start, Darth, about how I think we possibly underestimate or maybe don't consider or think about how traumatic a post-apocalypse would be for a child. And, you know, like, that's, I mean, I feel like that's sort of what defines the difference between Kirsten and Tyler, is that, like, how did they both respond to the apocalypse? Kirsten was lucky enough to have, like, Jeevan, you know, who was a fairly compassionate, understanding guy, and whereas, like, Tyler had a group of paranoid, selfish individuals who were in it, who were, you know, only working together out of necessity, kind of thing. Like, sees the worst in people. Like, yeah, that would fuck you up a lot, I reckon.
Ironically, I want to make the opposite argument that, like, when, like, Tyler leaving was probably the worst thing that he could have done, because he was at such a young age that having to fend for himself out when the world is dead, that would have, I think, traumatized him way more than what he had there, because he had all of his life's necessities were fulfilled there. And yes, there was some tension, but for the most part, like, everyone got along with each other, and like, Clarke legitimately was trying to love the kid as best he knew how, and his mom definitely was trying as best she knew how, and the nurse or maid or whatever you want to call her, his guardian before she left, at least she was always by his side, so he always had someone with him. And basically, I'm just saying that he was a lot safer, and the kids would have felt that, you know, physical safeness that Kirsten didn't have when she's walking out in the snow across a whole frozen lake, you know, with Jeevan. And yeah, Jeevan's kind and all of this stuff, but she doesn't know when she's going to get dinner. They might not eat for days. They have to find and kill their own food. It's an entirely different set of experiences for the two, and between the two, Tyler should have been the one who is less traumatized because of Maslow's hierarchy, because he has all of this stuff. Of course, that's not getting into, like, the, you know, whatever inherent psychology. Maybe he was messed up from birth, if you want to go that route. I'm sure
right,
David,
like,
has a whole monologue
but
to give about that.
But they're gonna kick him out. Clarke is like, it's time for them to go. Like, you know, and so, like, they both, okay, here is my, like, galaxy brain take on these two characters. They are both abandoned by the people that are supposed to take care of them, right? Tyler is abandoned by Clarke in that Clarke is like, it's time for, Elizabeth and Tyler to go. He's saying this to Arthur. And Tyler fakes his own death ostensibly to save his mother and to allow her to keep living there because he knows that he's the problem, right? And wherever he goes, his mother is going to go. So he sort of sacrifices his own safety to save her and to give her a comfortable life. And, is ostensibly abandoned in that way. And then Kirsten is obviously abandoned by Jeevan. We sort of really don't know what happened to Frank either. But the abandonment is different. But it's also similar for both of them because they're both abandoned and they blame themselves, right? Jeevan ostensibly leaves Kirsten because he gets to the point where he's like, I haven't made any decisions since I met you. And he gets really upset about the comic book. And they both kind of get abandoned because of this fucking book. Like, it's the fact that, Tyler's always reading this book. Ends up reading this book in the plane full of dead people like an absolute psycho. And Clarke is like, we got to get rid of him. And so they both get abandoned for the same reason, but the abandonment is different and how they react to it is very different. Kirsten's then lucky enough to bump into people that make art. And she's able to address and work through her trauma by performing and by processing these feelings. It's like what Sommerville was saying, like looking it right in the eye. And Tyler's solution is pretend it never happened. Burn the past, pretend it doesn't exist, invent new fictions and new mythologies, and build a new world that has no memory of what came before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to say, like, I think perhaps having at least some of your hierarchy of needs met creates the conditions to devolve into delusion and mania. If you're Kirsten, I don't know, like, I feel like, hunting for your food, trying your best to survive, that gives, that I wouldn't fucking know, but perhaps that gives you a certain clarity and cuts through layers of pretension and just whatnot. Gets you to, you have no time for that. You need to be honest and truthful. Whereas like if you're quarantined in a tiny little plane and your only thing to look at is a comic book, I feel like that possibly creates the right conditions to go a little crazy, to fake your own death and manipulate other kids into believing that this, fiction is your reality.
I could also, since we jumped there, I could also say that it's interesting that Tyler's, his betrayals were much more perceived betrayals than actual, if that makes any sense.
100%.
Because, like, when they shoot the guy that could have been infected, you could make the argument that was the right decision. There were ways around it, but you could make the argument it was the right call. And when Clarke is talking about it's, Elizabeth and Tyler have to go, he was, if I remember correctly, he was literally talking to the ghost of Arthur at that point. I don't think that was ever going to happen. I don't think he could stand to be that person to literally kick a kid out into this world. So I think that was a perceived betrayal and not one that ever would have actually taken place. And it's not something that he should have ever heard.
Yeah, it's like writing a letter that you never send to someone as like a therapy exercise. It's like he just needs to get it out because he's gone a little bit crazy. And it's funny that it's Tyler's idea to do the speak to the dead jiggling. I think it's very ironic.
Is it his idea?
Yeah, because
he's doing it with the other kids.
The kids do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very funny. Also, I just want to point this out. So there's a couple of big beats. The kind of next big beat we get is Clarke finds his way into the air traffic control tower, and he gets a voicemail from his boyfriend, husband, whatever the relationship is, now that he finally has cell signal. And it's a rough voicemail, and it's like this dude's dying voicemail, and he's like, oh yeah, like, about the funeral, like, I didn't come, you know, it's not because I had work. He basically is like, it's not because I had work, it's because I was having an affair. I'm like, dude, you don't have to say that. You don't have to say that. It's fine. Just don't.
I missed that.
Yeah, he's like, he says something like, remember that time with blah blah.
Oh yeah, I wrote that down. He's like, what happened at Johnny's? And I wrote down, what happened at Johnny's?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah, I read that as like an affair or something like that. Yeah. And then
Maybe
Elizabeth...
they just went out drinking and had a nice night, David.
Oh, yeah, because this show's
Got to jump right to a fair.
This show's interested in people having a good time. This all happens, and then we learn that there's this guy who's pretending to be a Homeland Security dude, who's actually like the night janitor, and Clarke finds this guy has bangers in his jacket. He gets high. And the next morning, everyone realizes that this guy's left with the girls' football team, except for the goalie. And this is the moment where Clarke steps forward and he sort of decides to do something about the situation they're in. Because so far, all he's done is drink, basically. He's just been drunk the whole time, which honestly, fair enough. Like, the world's ending. Fair.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's coping in the most like selfish, self-destructive ways, and no regard for anyone else. Like, no. It's so realistic.
They are just eviscerating the bathrooms.
Like no one wants to clean it. It's everyone else's problem, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And he sort of steps up, and everyone's gathered, and they're sort of freaking out about these people going. And Clarke says, "All that matters is the now, and what got us to this point, because the past is a map, and it got us here. And here at this airport, we have won the post-apocalyptic lottery. And that plane leaving just made all of our shares go up, okay? The drawbridge is closed because Jerry Mercer, the fucking coward Jerry Mercer, has effectively tripled our food supply. Here we are, with much of our hierarchy of needs already met. We have shelter, we have food, we're a community, and we're tucked away in a place no one is ever going to find us." And it's at this point that Elizabeth kind of, in order to reinforce this thing, concocts this lie about the three of them, Clarke and Miles, confronting Jerry the previous night, because the nuns, for some reason, don't believe Clarke. And so they reinforce this lie, and it just sort of immediately buys them into this position of authority, and they sort of drag Tyler along for the ride. But, you know, it's a kingdom founded on this mistruth, this bending of the truth, that is going to become the story of, you know, them running this place, basically. It's just like a series of half-truths and lies and stuff like that, and manipulations.
I had a problem with that. I don't know about you guys. Because it seems so unnecessary to me that they had to, like, lie about anything. It's like, the girls are gone. You can't dispute the evidence. The girls are gone. The plane is gone. The fake dude is gone. You know.
I mean, look, to be fair, there's a group of nuns who already believe a bunch of stuff that is, like, not true. So it's like, I don't know. Their relationship with reality is thin at best. It's the end of the world. You might just need to double down. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it, is what I'm saying.
Well, that tracks.
I sort of I zoned out a little bit. What you're saying? They were lying, Darth.
When Elizabeth and the guard, they come up and they kind of try to reinforce what Clarke is saying, because for whatever reason, like, people aren't believing him that the guy was fake, even though he's holding the badge of the dude. And the security guard is like, I worked with him. Like, it's legit. He cleaned the bathrooms, and I don't know. Like, the whole thing seemed like they, I guess, like, from a writing perspective, it's like they were trying to force. I kept feeling like they were trying to force drama in where they didn't really need it, because there wasn't.
Right. It was already based on the truth.
He needed to not have the badge. Like, he needed to not have proof. Then all of this stuff would make sense. But the badge equals proof, in my opinion. So then all of this questioning of the truth is just not needed.
Right. Well, I kind of understand, like, you know, he's got glasses. Like, it's sort of hard to, like, it obscures the face a lot when you have glasses. And, you know, like, he's like, look at it. He's like, that's him. And then someone's like, yeah, I guess I can see it, you know, kind of thing. I can kind of see how there may be a bit of ambiguity in there.
So Clark Kent's getting his retribution here. He's like, see, you can't.
See? Very good.
I also like that detail about how he's the one that cleans the bathrooms. Now that he's gone, it's a mess.
It's just a mess, yeah.
Yeah.
God, this show's good.
And then they also make Elizabeth calls Clark Mark Antony, and then later they say they form a triumvirate.
Yeah, go on, Pat, explain. Let's hear it.
Just a consolidation of political power between a couple people is all.
Yeah, but you need to say who Mark Antony is and, like, explain the reference.
Yeah, okay. Mark Antony was one of the senators in the late Roman Republic. So him, Caesar, and I think Crassus. They were sort of like, there was a lot of political turmoil going on in Rome. Because they each held equal positions of political power, they were in a gridlock, and so they just made a deal that if they all agree on, you know, things to pass in the Senate, then three can effectively control all of, like, the Roman Empire.
Yeah, it's effectively the idea that was very well explained. It's effectively the idea that, like, if you have these systems that are designed to produce fairness and balance and produce outcomes, like government, which is like produce social outcomes on behalf of the people. But if you have people in certain positions that can collude and collaborate, they can effectively undermine, like, what a government is and undermine democracy, which is not at all relevant to anything currently happening. So just a random aside. Totally fine and normal stuff happening in the world.
I'm blanking on the guard's name.
Miles.
I was gonna say Milo. I got the M. I don't know.
That's close.
So one thing that I don't know if it's clear at all is when he develops feelings for Clark, and so I'm now wondering if when he joins Elizabeth, if that is really like the three of them being put in charge versus just him going, I want to, like, I got a crush on this dude, so I'm going to support Clark. Does that make sense?
But you think he's trying to cozy up to a person in a position of power?
Oh, I mean, he wanted to date him. So I'm like, what if that's a completely different it's a completely different reading from, like, the three of them being, you know, put in power, quote unquote, versus Elizabeth and Clark are in charge and Miles is like the love interest. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not firm on what point he becomes the love interest, because that scene happens, like, so far into the event, you know?
Are you just saying, like, do we see any more of that romantic relationship develop prior to them forming a triumvirate?
I'm saying, is it really a triumvirate if he is there for Clark and not there to rule?
Oh, yeah, I mean, he can want to be in charge and also want to fuck Clark at the same time. I don't think those are conflicting motivations.
Yeah, those can coexist just fine. I think it would make it worse.
It's also interesting. He was the one in charge, right? He was the only security guard there, the only one, like, with a gun. Like, he could easily have been the person, and he literally threw it all in the trash. Granted, he went back and got the gun later, but still, it's interesting. Like, at the beginning, he throws away the power, and then at that moment goes and at least partially, like, reclaims the power.
Yes. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Well, and I think that he's able to do that because he has... Okay, if he's the only security guard in the airport, controlling this airport's impossible. if he is one of 3 leaders who lead a community, that's a very different story, you know? He's the one that has to deal with all the passengers losing their fucking mind at the start of the episode. That's very different than the world's already ended and we're leading a community. Those are kind of related but different positions to occupy, I think. It's interesting, though. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. A couple things then that I wanted to touch on. I've written down here in my notes, Jesus Christ. Tyler is the most Darth-coded character of all time. The first thing he does when the world ends is he just starts downloading all of Wikipedia, and I was like, it's something Darth would do.
I mean, that was brilliant. I definitely would have been trying to like catalog stuff, but I would not have been smart enough to go to Wikipedia.
I was like, that's like so practical.
Well, and does Wikipedia have a download button?
Well, his device might. We don't know what little device this is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like what does he have? Some sort of like some scraper software? Like how's he getting these pages?
How's he getting these pages, bro? This is ding. If Tyler's downloading Wikipedia, but there's no download button on Wikipedia, how does then we get a thing I don't quite understand is, so Tyler has all the kids go up in the tower, and they're doing this like little healing circle where they're talking to dead people, and Clarke stops it from happening, and the sort of way that he explains the reason that he stopped it is like, I wouldn't say he accuses Tyler of this, but he basically says like, like what's, you always organizing these little games, but you never play yourself, sort of thing, like is what he says to Tyler. And then he makes Tyler do the exercise of talking to Arthur. And we hear, it's like diabolically tragic because this microphone in the tower is a pass-through to one of the walkie-talkies, which will become an important plot point at the end of the episode. And you get to watch Elizabeth try and listen to her son talk to Arthur. And it's just really rough. But I don't understand why Clarke stops this exercise. I mean, obviously he's upset they're in the tower, but like, yeah, what's going on in this scene?
My reading was that it was an affront to his power. Now that he wasn't the 2 I see, now he was the person, and they were in his domain, being the tower. And I don't know how accurate that is, but that's kind of how especially with the explanation not really making sense. Like, you have to stop doing this because you're not partaking in it. Like, if you're the psychologist who's helping other people, you shouldn't have to stop because you're not helping yourself. Like, I don't know that that's good logic.
Right, it's just Clarke's paranoia about anyone undermining his authority type thing.
Or very much it could have been that you walk up there and you see like all of the kids are like clustered in a worship circle around Tyler. So you could see maybe the beginning of like a cult there. I don't know if there's enough to read into that, but maybe.
Well, he said that when they talk about Arthur, they talk about him as this guy that like, he's ostensibly someone that everybody loves, but no one really likes. And I think Tyler's probably like there's something about him that is like similar in that he has a magnetism to him. And so you might be like touching at the edges of something Clarke sees in Tyler that we don't necessarily have the page space to see fully in the show yet. We'll obviously get it in the next episode, but there is something about him that people want to follow. There's a line from Elizabeth later that we'll talk about that I think cuts to the heart of that, right? There's something about Tyler that Clarke, I wouldn't say covets, but he finds it lacking in himself, and Arthur's always had it, and this kid has inherited that same thing.
I was going to say even potentially the opposite. It's that maybe he's seeing the things that he disliked the most in Arthur, which are now extremely prevalent in the kid. and he's trying to do everything he can to stop the kid from being the bad parts of Arthur.
Right. That's a much more generous reading for Clarke, I think. Yeah. I think both make sense, though. Like, the idea that this is, like, this is something that he resents just at a purely, like, emotional level. There's no logic to this. It's just, like, he reacts to it, not really knowing why he's reacting to it, and then we can start to put that together as an explanation.
See, it's not all just to kill the children. You know, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I love that. You contain multitudes, Darth. One day you kill the kids, next day you like empathize with the kids. It's like, pick a lane, dude. Jeez. And Pat, do you have any thoughts on that? Or should we?
No, I don't know what to make of that scene. Yeah, I don't know.
Hey, if you have an idea, let us know in the comments, or send us a message on Patreon. I'd love to know how people read that scene, because I'm sure that people have some complicated feelings about Clarke as a character when it comes to this behavior.
I said earlier that was the first scene where it proves that he is intelligent, like they were earlier saying that he was,
Right.
and it also leans into the prophet, quote unquote, that he becomes later, where he's able to come up with this, this psychological exercise that is meant to help people heal, and in fact it does that. You know, the kids are getting something out of it, even the adults are getting something out of it. You know, when Clarke is talking to Arthur, he is healing in that moment, even though he's talking about throwing a kid out into the wild, you know. And if Tyler came up with all of that on his own, you know, that's a highly intelligent thing. You know, maybe he read it on Wikipedia. We don't know, but maybe that was all him.
Well, and he doesn't believe it. Like, he doesn't participate. That's the accusation that Clarke levels at him. He's basically saying, like, well, you don't believe any of this. You're just doing this for the power and the control. You know? Which is exactly what he does with the kids with the Undersea. He doesn't believe any of it. He knows it's fiction. Like, so I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think you've cut right to the heart of, like, what's going on there, Darth. Yeah, bad kid. Get this kid away from me. The next thing I have in my notes is the second copy of Station 11 and the big Elizabeth conversation with Tyler, and then the standoff. Did you guys have anything before that?
I mean, it was interesting that the entire when she gives him the book, like, that entire thing is like, I don't know, Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, or it's some big, like, party that they're doing.
It's Christmas, yeah.
And she's like, here, I'm gonna give you all of the presents that your dad has been sending you for a decade that I hid from you, and I was like, oh, that is heartbreaking. And then it turns out all of that was a lie, and I'm like, oh, that's even more heartbreaking.
It's even worse than you thought. So she tells Tyler, you know, I kept all these letters that your father sent to you, and I burned them all. And he's like, oh, you know, he says why, and she says, because I'm selfish. And then she tells, this is written in all caps, and then she tells Clarke that Arthur never sent any letters, and she's just trying to make her kid feel better. And I was like, oh my God, like, stop lying to your son, Elizabeth. What are we doing? Oh, it's brutal. And then, yeah, we get the dude coming out of the doomed airplane. But the crucial detail here is she gifts Tyler the second copy of Station 11 that Arthur sent for Tyler, and explains that it was from Miranda, his first wife. And I don't know if did you guys write down what Tyler is looking at on Wikipedia in this moment? He goes to...
What was it?
So there's this little conversation where he shows Liz. She's like, "What are you doing?" And he shows her the page, and he goes, "What if I just didn't, like, what if I deleted it and didn't download it?" And she says, "We just reinvent it." And you know what they're looking at? The Wikipedia
Oh, it's
page for
capitalism.
capitalism. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
remember that at the time, and I was like, "Oh, David is jumping up and down right now."
It was me and
He's
my
like, "What if I deleted it?"
me in my empty apartment going, "Let's go." Yeah, good stuff. Listen, I'm brave enough to say it. Fuck capitalism. I'll say it. A lot of podcasts, they won't say it. I'll say it. Fuck capitalism. I realize that is the sign off for Remap Radio, but anyway, fuck capitalism. And I love a show that just says it. And also, I think it's pretty telling with Elizabeth as a character that she says, like, we'll just reinvent it anyway. Which turns out to, like, not be true in the future. Like, this is not the case. Like, you know, they in the future, there is literally a traveling symphony of people that perform musicals and stuff that don't need, there's no money. Like, capitalism doesn't really exist in the future, which I also think is interesting and probably telling about Elizabeth's worldview. And we kind of don't know what the systems are at the heart of Severn Airport 20 years later. Like, we don't know what that society looks like, but I'm willing to bet that they've retained a bunch of those previous ideas in a way that the traveling symphony doesn't have to hasn't had to deal with before, which is just interesting and says a lot about Elizabeth. So we get the dude coming out of the dude. We get the sick guy. Tyler goes and reads the comic book and he's sulking. He's sulking about not wanting to be involved in the party. I don't know. He's a weird kid.
He's got a ton of
obsessed.
Anakin vibes. Just the angsty kid.
He's weirdly obsessed with a plane full of dead people. That's normal behavior.
Yeah, normal kid stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy opens the door and sort of falls out. Now, it's been 12 days since the end of the world. And I remember lockdown. 12 days is not enough to be sure that someone isn't sick. And Tyler takes this guy inside, and the dude looks fully like a zombie. Like, he is just emaciated, not looking well. And there's this big standoff where everyone is, you know, they're sort of, everyone's yelling and everyone's panicked, and Miles pulls out the gun, and Tyler's like, he's not sick, like, he must be immune. And Elizabeth's like, you need to get away from him, like, come here, and then, you know, Miles is like, no, like, stay where you are. And as this all rises to a crescendo, Miles shoots this guy in the head, and then there's this big debate about whether they throw out Elizabeth and Tyler, because Elizabeth goes and hugs Tyler, and eventually they compromise and they put them in quarantine for a month. I don't want to talk about moral relativism yet, because I have a lot of that in the next episode, but yeah. Talk to me about shooting this guy through the fucking head, man. This is, like, intense stuff.
Deserved.
Yeah.
I was like, if you come out of a plane full of dead people, you know, you've been there a fortnight, like, yeah, you're pretty out of sorts. I understand, but, like, fuck, man, like, what? Yeah, man. Just came out of a disease-ridden plane. There's, you know, people keeping their distance. Someone's pointing a gun at me. Why didn't I just, like, limp over? I don't know. That guy, like, made all the wrong decisions. Like, I don't know. He deserved to get shot, honestly.
Stand still, bro. Yeah, what are you doing? Like, yeah. I guess he was crazed, you know. I don't know. But yeah, not a good thing to do in that situation. Just be chill. Like in real airports, the answer is be chill. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I don't know how to go back and check. I don't know how to verify this, but I was firmly convinced that this gentleman was mentally handicapped.
Okay.
Okay.
Did y'all get that?
Not necessarily.
I'm not saying that can't be the case. I'm just not sure the show is interested in that as an angle. Like, I think it's more just like he's crazed because he's been trapped on a plane alone with dead people for 12 days. That's enough to make anybody insane, I feel. That's my thought,
And
anyway.
like, I'm just thinking about, like, what what was the inside of that plane like as well? Like just rotting corpses for 12 days? Like
That'd be good.
Yeah, it's fucked up. And like, I don't know, so many questions. Like, why? If he was okay, why was he still in there? Like,
Why do you wait that long?
Yeah, like, were there other people? Like,
Questions. Yeah, there's a whole. Could you imagine? I don't think the show does this, but like, you know, in 2 episodes' time, we have an entire episode on the spent on the inside of this plane. It's just
that'd be great, actually.
Yeah, deeply harrowing. Someone write. There's an exercise that you do in high school English, where you'll read a book, and I think it's a really uninstructive exercise in my opinion. But you read a novel, and then there'll be like a silence in the novel, and the teacher will be like, "Oh, like write this chapter that doesn't exist in the book where there's a silence. Like write about what happens." And it's an exercise that's supposed to teach you how to write in someone else's voice. I think it's like deeply uninstructive and like not helpful, but this is the kind of thing where it's like if someone said Station 11, like for the novel, like write a missing chapter, I would write this chapter of like this dude's life inside this plane for 12 days. You have to do a lot of work to make it like feel logical, but man, that would be good. Just so fraught and tense, and like imagine the moment where the plane lands and they're like, you're never getting off this plane ever, like you're gonna die in here. Like man, that would fuck you up.
And like, imagine like it starts off with just like one person coughing, and then the next hour it's like a couple more people, and then everyone starts to realize that like, oh shit, like the cough is spreading and they're trying to desperate to get out. Yeah. Maybe some violence starts happening. I can see an interesting episode in that. Yeah.
It's basically that Doctor Who episode Midnight. Basically.
Yeah. What a great episode.
Such a good episode of TV. That might be my... Blink is still my favorite, but it's second. I think any episode of Doctor Who that can be done by actors on a stage immediately is going to be good.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Anyway, in the same way that I've said before, me and Pat will eventually do an Assassin's Creed show. Me and Mitchie will at some point do Doctor Who stuff, and I'm very interested to talk about those early seasons of the reboot, because man, there are some absolute classics in there, like all-time TV, like literally all-time episodes of TV just stashed away quietly in this Doctor Who show. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Stephen Moffat, are they?
No, that's all Russell T Davies.
Oh, okay.
It's very audacious of you to think that Stephen Moffat could write a good episode of television.
In my head, he's just the guy. He's just the early Doctor Who guy.
He did do Blink. He did write Blink. To be fair, I was being being facetious. His best episodes of Doctor Who are the ones that are written by him when someone else is running a show. Because there's someone to slap his hand away from the keyboard and say, "Don't do that, Stephen." Anyway, very tense scene, very good stuff. I might move us along here to the Elizabeth and Clarke argument, and then we can talk about the ending of this episode, unless you guys have anything else. Darth is furiously Googling something.
I am... I really want to find a clip of that guy, but I have not been able to. I'll have to go back and watch.
But yeah, do some homework, come back next episode. Let us know. Let us know. Okay, so we're at day 100 now. Clarke starts at museum of all the things that came before. And then he and Elizabeth get into this argument about Arthur. And Elizabeth says, and this is devastating, by the way. And I'll unpack a little bit about like what Elizabeth is doing here rhetorically, but I'll give you what she says first. This is about Arthur. Quote, "Everyone loved him. I mean, it takes every
ounce of your energy every day to get people to even like you. To actually listen to the sentences that you say. But art didn't have to try. That must feel awful."
And like, bro, I don't know how to explain this properly, but if you're not someone that has like natural charisma and that people naturally like, and you see other people that have it, I have to imagine that as like completely, and you have to try so hard to be liked and so hard to just be seen by people. That must be devastating. Like, and I love the way that Elizabeth does this maneuver, because it's this sort of it also positions Arthur as like the antithesis of Miranda in some ways as well, where, you know, Miranda's whole thing is like, she's like, it's better to not be seen. It's better, you know, it's better to go unseen. It's better to not be noticed. And she just wants a life of like, she wants to be this reclusive artist that works on this comic book and does her art, and lives her life, doesn't want to be famous. And Arthur is this guy who everyone loves, everyone pays attention to at all times. He's like magnetic. He's the center of every room. And Clarke's entire life has been an exercise in making people like him. And it's like, bro, like, and I think in some ways it's a fairly devastating critique and like emotional blow to someone like Clarke, because like, yeah, like that is what he's done. He's made himself important by becoming useful because no one likes him, you know?
Like, I don't know, just like, what a cold thing to say to someone as well. Like, you know, the only situation which you'd say that is like if you're really trying to like go for the jugular, you know, like try and like beat someone emotionally to the ground kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's effective because it's like accurate, right? Yeah.
Right. And like, I know people like this that are sort of like a bit like Clarke, or a bit like the way that Elizabeth perceives Clarke anyway. Whether we agree with her or not is, I think, irrelevant, because I think he agrees with her, which is the important thing. Like, I know people like this, and like, you can never say this to them because it's like, it would just destroy them. Because if that happened, they would have to admit that they would have to actively admit that all of this is like, has been such an effort and such a facade, and that it's all fragile. And like, I can't give specifics because I don't want to like accidentally dox someone, but I watched this happen to somebody in real time, where they realized that all of this stuff they've been doing and all the stuff they've been working on for years, they were just never going to have it like they wanted to have it. Like, they could just never reach the level they were trying to reach. They'd hit this limit, and it just completely destroyed them to the point where like they changed careers. Like, it was brutal to watch. And I think it's just you know, Clarke's reaction to this is they have to go. Like, I'm going to have to throw them out, you know? He's already threatened by Tyler, and he is now threatened by Elizabeth, and he's like, you know, it's time for them to go. Like, his reaction is no introspection whatsoever. It's, let's get them out of here, you know?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, it's exactly the deepest insecurity he has, and she hits right on it. It's like, you know, the only condition in which he would have taken that course of action to kick them out. Yeah.
Yeah, she crosses the line, and so he crosses the line back, right? Yeah. It's pretty devastating.
I find it really interesting that a whole lot of, I mean, even in real life, not just shows, but the person who is in charge very frequently is someone that knows that they are not there to be liked. And you'll definitely see that a whole lot in like military, whether that's a show or whether it's real life, but they are not there to be your friend. They are there to make the hard decisions and to be the one that everyone is angry at because they made the hard decision that no one else was willing to make. So it's really interesting that like he's kind of being accused of the thing that also would be keeping people alive, you know, even though that's not what he wants to be. Like, he wants to be loved, but you have to have the other part of it too. You have to have the person who's like willing to shoot you in the head if that's what the community needs, but he doesn't want to be that person. I don't know. It was just an interesting thought.
Yeah, he's ill-suited to be a sustainable leader because he doesn't want to be disliked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't... It's every CEO ever. don't tell them. But like, yeah, like part of the position this show has is like to be in charge. You have to do the unpopular thing sometimes. But also, I think there's probably a argument to be made that like part of what makes the community work is that people like who's in charge, because it is this very fragile peace that is maintained and this fragile sense of civility. You know, an element of it is like you have to be liked and you have to do things that are disliked, but only disliked to certain measures. You know, there's an invisible threshold that exists that you can't cross over, because once you do, you can never come back, type of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it's on the tip. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue of there are characters who are so the opposite of that. But they're not the person usually. Usually they're like the 2IC or whatever, and they're the ones who are like, we have to cut off this bulkhead and we have to sacrifice an entire floor of people or we all die. And like they are the ones who are making like the mathematical choice that
Spock
like,
is the classic. Like Spock is literally that character who's like he is the one that has to make all the hard choices and put all the unpopular logical things forward.
Yeah, and maybe that's because I've been watching a lot of Star Trek, and maybe that's what I've been pulling that idea from. But I feel like it's really consistent that you'll see stories like this where one character is kind of like hated that's in the leadership because they make those hard choices, but also acknowledge that you have to have that person there, even by the very community that doesn't want them. And every time we say community, I've got Jeff Winger's voice in my head, and I don't know if that's healthy or unhealthy.
That's me too. It's all up in there. Yeah, I mean, I think that what ends up being interesting to me about this as an idea with Clarke is we haven't seen a lot of him before the collapse either. So we also don't know what he was like before all of this happened. Like, we have a sense of it. We get him, a couple times with Miranda at the party. We kind of don't really get access to his interiority or his life and, like, what his life is shaped like before the collapse. And so I'm wondering if we'll get more of that later, and it might help us understand a more complete picture of where this need to be liked comes from. And so far, we don't really have a good view of that.
Yeah, you can definitely infer a lot just by looking at his house and how it was decorated, and the things that he did while he was there, just in the brief scene that we had, and the fact of the working with CEOs and all this kind of stuff. But it also kind of feels like all of that stuff goes against the character that he portrays, if that makes any sense.
It does, and that's what's really interesting about him as a character. Like, he's just full of these contradictions.
Yeah, like he is. There are so many like scenes of like compassion he shows that no one else is doing. Like, he goes out into the runway for Elizabeth. He's like, you should come inside. Like, there's no jet coming. Yeah, he is. He does seem compelled to do the right thing a lot of the time. That, and I don't know. I think with, just the case with a lot of people in life, like you feel compelled to do a good thing when you see someone else do a bad thing. Like, I'm just thinking about his, in the previous episodes where he's like, he goes out to talk to Miranda, after she like storms out the dinner. Like, he's the only one to be like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, I know Arthur's a dick, kind of stuff.
But then he's not compelled enough to tell any of Arthur's wives about the affairs that Arthur is having. Like, that's the contradiction, right? Where it's like, he feels compelled when it strikes his fancy, but he's not like, it's not like a moral underpinning of who he is. It's like a thing that happens to him. His conscience descends upon him at times.
It has to be like the right moment. Like, the timing has to be right. Yeah.
We've all talked, and the story also assumes that he does know about all the affairs, but it's not like he would have been in the room for it, right?
Yeah, I have a
know what
pet
I'm
theory.
saying?
I have a pet theory, which is like Clarke doesn't know about the affairs, but he knows Arthur well enough to, like, to know when Arthur's behavior changes. That probably indicates an affair. Like, I don't think he's ever like got evidence, but I think he probably knows when it's happening.
Yeah, but both women, both Miranda and Elizabeth, both said to him like, "Why didn't you tell us?" You know, and then we're talking about it like he knew as well. So everyone is assuming that he knows. So obviously the story is painting it that way, but like there's no proof that he does. And I'm like, have we been gaslighting him this whole entire time?
Clarke's secretly a good guy. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if in the book you get confirmation either way. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's an interesting thought though. But he's certainly complicit, even if he doesn't explicitly know. Is my feeling anyway. Okay, so as we already said, Tyler overhears Arthur talking. Tyler overhears Clarke talking to Arthur, making this big confession about how he feels, and like basically processing everything Elizabeth has said. And he comes to the conclusion it's time for Elizabeth and Tyler to go, which Tyler overhears. Tyler then blows himself up in the plane of corpses, or does he? And nah, he doesn't. He basically stages his own death, and then we end the episode with a voiceover of Clarke reading yet again more Shakespeare, this time from Hamlet, which I'll give you guys in a second. Before I do the Shakespeare theory portion of this ending, yeah, how's this work for you guys? This little ending here, this little crescendo to the episode.
What did I write? Locked up with comic book, goes crazy and fearful, dedicates his life to know before, fakes his own death.
Nailed it. It's like the wildest free association ever.
Yeah, that's.
Love that.
It probably would have been better for the story and for his character to show more of a consequence of the month locked up in the airplane with only the comic book. And I don't necessarily know how you could do that, but it's kind of just they walk out of there and everything is fine. It doesn't seem like, a month in the hole, like that's a punishment in prison. Like isolation is a problem. And granted, he had his mom there, but still isolation is a punishment, and it has, it causes trauma, and we don't necessarily see the evidence of that. And I don't know how you could physically show that in some fashion, but I think if they had used that to paint more of where his character is going, I think that could have made a lot of sense.
Well, there's one line that I really like when they get out of the plane and they ask them to wear the masks, and Tyler goes, "I told you so." Like as if that month in the plane, he's paranoia about like the group has like dramatically risen, and yeah, it's like an irreparable
it's also...
sort of like breaking.
Is it paranoia if
if
it's right? He was telling the future. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like it's justified to him that like these are people that are not on his side, kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, Darth, I don't know. I think faking your own death by blowing up a plane full of dead people that could indicate some trauma. That could maybe point to some trauma.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, but like cut out the isolation in the plane and him blowing himself up would still make sense, right? So like,
oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, I also I think, he's on the plane, he's memorizing the comic, which is kind of weird, but I see what you're saying. You maybe wanted like a reminder of whatever's gone wrong with him before this final scene to sort of tie it together or emphasize what the lockdown did to him.
Yeah, like after that, he potentially maybe he refuses to speak to adults after that, because he's like, he has now seen proof adults cannot be trusted at all, and at that point it's only the kids who are the quote unquote pure ones, something like that, that like leads us towards what he's becoming.
Yeah, acknowledged. I could see that would be like a very you-coded thing to have. I just don't know what it would be. I think you're right. Like, I don't know what you would do to achieve that. I don't know. Let us know in the comments if you have a pitch. Shakespeare time? Shakespeare time.
I was trying to I was trying to delay.
delay. I don't have to learn about this guy. Okay, so we get Clarke reading from Hamlet as a voiceover as we match cut between a young Tyler and the prophet. And he reads this passage. This passage is when Horatio sees the ghost of the king for the second time, I think. And he says, okay. So, as a quick reminder, Hamlet is a play. The king is killed by his brother, and then the queen marries the brother who killed the king, and Hamlet is the prince of Denmark, and he is dealing with this fact, and his father's ghost basically comes to him, and he's like, yo, Hamlet, you've got to avenge my death, dude. And then Hamlet goes through this series of events and activities where he tries to complete his vengeance on his uncle, and in doing so, destroys the lives of everyone around him and causes far more damage than the original murder ever did. Horatio is basically the character in the story who is like, he's not the point of view character, right? Hamlet's the protagonist, he's a point of view character. But Horatio is kind of the guy who is the most reasonable and grounded in the story. So Horatio's the way that we get a lot of the supernatural stuff confirmed to be real. It is the high headline here. So this is the bit that Clarke reads from Horatio, seeing the ghost. Quote, but soft, behold, lo, where it comes again. I'll cross it though it blast me. Stay, illusion. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that made to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, oh, speak, speak, speak. And he's like pleading with this ghost. There's two ways to read this. Either he's announcing he's going to confront the ghost, and he's basically I'll cross it though it blasts me, right? Like, I will dance with this ghost. I will put myself in jeopardy to deal with this ghost, and then he starts speaking to it, where he's like talking himself up to it. Or the same line is typically read as where he says, I'll cross it though it blasts me. He's being literal, and he's talking about using the cross for protection. Like, I'll cross it though it blasts me. So this little moment here is him effectively talking to the ghost of a father, and confronting the ghost of this father, which is sort of the same thing that Clarke has done at the end of this episode, where he talks to Arthur's ghost and he confronts Arthur's ghost, and the consequences of that. It's a pretty straightforward, like, it means one thing in the play, it's used in the same way in the TV show. I think it's just good writing. Like, it's just very clean thematic work to me. Yeah.
So, if he were pleading with Arthur's ghost, do you think it would have been for permission to quote unquote kill his son, or for the strength not to?
I think it's probably more likely he's sort of looking for answers, right? Like, in theory, this kid just killed himself, and he's basically like, yo, Arthur, like, fucking, like, what's going on? Like, what is going on? Like, speak to me. Like, if you know why all this is happening and where all this is going, like, you need to tell me. Like, did this happen for a reason? Like, what's going on?
I guess that was in reference to his previous conversation, the one that drove Tyler away. Because I realized at that point he could have been saying, you know, Arthur, this is what I think needs to happen. You know, give me permission to kick your kid out, or tell me not to. And then the second instance that you're talking about, he's like, now it's a completely different level of you know, now the kid's dead. Sorry.
Well, that's kind of how it goes
We
in
don't
the.
advocate killing children.
We don't advocate killing children. It
Disclaimer.
does seem to be coming up a lot in this episode. That's sort of how it goes in the play too. Like, he sees the ghost for the first time and he thinks he's crazy and he's like not sure what to make of it. And the second time he's like, okay, I'm gonna talk to this ghost and I'm gonna tell it to fucking like give me some answers here. And that's sort of the same thing with Clarke, where it's like, well, you know, he speaks sort of to Arthur's ghost, and then the second time, he's kind of like, well, now I need to know what the future holds now that this has happened, kind of thing. Again, I'm also not sure that I'm not sure that Clarke is really saying this. I think this is just the story being poetic, as it, as it tends to do. But yeah, I'm not sure whether Clarke is asking for permission or asking if he should do it. I don't know that he knows either. He's not sure what he's asking. He's not sure what the outcome of voicing this will be and what his intention is. But he is compelled to say these things.
I would have adored it if, like, not just in this scene, but every time that anyone is using the headset and they're in there, they're talking into the wind, if you'll randomly just hear little bits of static, and then when he's talking to Arthur, you hear a little bit of static, and then part of you is wondering, is this Arthur trying to respond, or is it just the static? It's very uncharacteristic for me, because that's like, there's no answer to that. And usually I'm like, I gotta have the answers.
Well, once again, like, Arthur's ghost seems to be like the primary, like, animating force behind like everyone's motivations. So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm excited for the inevitable Arthur episode that I hope we get. I don't remember if there is one, but God, I hope there is one. Let me spend it
I
in.
feel like we already did get one though.
Oh, we had the Miranda episode.
Yeah, true. It's interesting how mythologized Arthur is, but like we know a great deal about him. Like, he is so like already demythologized already, but like he's also like mythologized for the characters. It's quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, you can tell Sommerville feels a lot of things for Arthur, like a lot of empathy and complicated things as he writes this show.
And the biggest conversation hasn't happened yet, which is Kirsten finding out that Tyler is Arthur's son, because he was kind of her dad, as far as I've been able to tell. Like, she talks about him. She never actually talks about her dad, but she talks about Arthur like he
Arthur
was her dad.
first dad, and then Jeevan was second dad.
Yeah.
Classic dads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah,
So
we haven't unpacked
I'm kind of I'm imagining that, like, when she finally finds out, it's going to be like a mixture of like shock and horror, because she's like, your dad was my favorite person ever. Oh, and I stabbed you. I stabbed you a lot.
Like, a lot. Yeah. Yeah. That's going to be an interesting conversation if we ever get it. Before we wrap up, I need to talk about there wasn't a good segue for this in our current conversation, but this airport as the ultimate heterotopia. So it's now that time of the show where I give you some Michel Foucault. And this is from Per of Other Spaces, Utopias and Heterotopias by Foucault, translated from the French by J. Miskowicz. So basically in this essay, Foucault argues that in a post-structuralist world, we are no longer concerned with history, but instead our lives are comprised of a network of near things and far things that resonate with each other, and that the past, present, and future are therefore disseminated into the spaces we habit through means of that network. He raises this as an example. Quote, "A train is an extraordinary bundle of relations because it is something through which one goes. It is also a means by which one can go from one point to another, and then it is also something that goes by." So that's the idea that like it's not one thing anymore. These spaces are transient, but they're also real spaces. And so his interest in this essay is in sites that relate to all other spaces, that are linked with other spaces, and also contradict other spaces. So in his example of the train, a train is somewhere that you use to get to somewhere else. It's also something that passes by you. So like, and that's the contradiction, but also it's a place by itself. Like a train at rest is somewhere that you could, in theory, go to. And he posits this, quote, "There are also probably in every culture, in every civilization, real places. Places that do exist and that are formed in the very founding of society, which are something like counter sites, a kind of effectively enacted utopia in which the real sites, all the other real sites that can be found within culture, are simultaneously represented, contested, and inverted. Places of this kind are outside of all places, even though it may be possible to indicate their location in reality. Because these places are absolutely different from all the sites that they reflect and speak about, I shall call them, by way of contrast to utopias, heterotopias. I believe that between utopias and these quite other sites, these heterotopias, there might be a sort of mixed, joint experience, which would be the mirror." So, the airport as the heterotopia. There's basically like 5 principles to the heterotopia. I'm only going to talk about 4 here because the 5th one is irrelevant to this conversation. But basically, heterotopia is a way that Foucault argues that we should now interpret and understand space, and that we should no longer talk about space as pure historical like places anymore. We've moved on from that in a post-structuralist world. So the first principle is, quote, "As its history unfolds," this is talking about the place that's a heterotopia, "that can make an existing heterotopia function in a very different fashion. For each heterotopia has a precise and determined function within society, and the same heterotopia can, according to the synchrony of the culture in which it occurs, have one function or another." So basically, one quality of heterotopias is that in each culture they exist within, they can have different functions to different people at different times, and frequently, culture to culture, they will have nuanced differences that contrast each other. So the airport satisfies this because airports have come to mean very different things throughout history. As a really easy thought exercise, think about before commercial flying was normalized versus like the airport during Bush Jr.'s 9/11 presidency versus the airport during like our pandemic. The difference between like, I don't know, like Singapore airport and like other airports. The ways that some airports have particular qualities that others don't. Singapore airport by itself is like a destination, whereas like Brisbane airport, for example, is somewhere you go in order to pass through to somewhere else. Severn City is very much the same thing, right? These people, they're not going to this airport. They're diverted from a place they're traveling to on these airplanes and they get stranded here. But then the place itself comes to mean something different as history moves and evolves with the people that are in it. The second principle of the heterotopia is that the heterotopia is capable of juxtaposing in a single real place several spaces, several sites that are in themselves incompatible. Basically, that something about heterotopia is incompatible with the spaces around it. This is why like a bar is a really good example, because it might be placed next to like a laundromat or like if it's like a microbrewery, probably like industrial stuff, right? It produces contradiction. And this airport, of course, maybe less so has the quality of this second, the second quality, the heterotopia. But I think as the show goes on, it does come to produce contradiction with the rest of the world. It obviously deeply contrasts the symphony themselves, but also it's a contrast to the rest of the world because the rest of the world's ending and they're tucked away in this pocket of survival and survivability. So I think in that way, it's pretty coherently a heterotopia. The third quality is that it's linked to slices in time, which is to say that they open onto what might be termed, for the sake of symmetry, heterochrony. I don't know why Foucault does this throughout this essay, but he keeps inventing new words. And basically that something about heterotopias is that they are either temporary or that during different times they have different cultural meanings, right? A simple example for this is airports are temporary places for the travelers moving through them, yet they are also indefinite places and temporary places for other people like employees, where employees travel to airports not to go somewhere but to work there. And this airport becomes a definite place for the people that stay there after the con man leaves. The fourth and probably most important for this show quality of the Heterotopia is that there is a presupposed system of opening and closing that both isolates them and makes these places penetrable, right? There has to be some mechanism that means that these places are accessible at some times, that they close behind themselves and they isolate themselves, but also that they're penetrable. So, like, again, a bar is a really good example. You can only go into a bar during certain hours when it's open. They will close at certain times. We get the great scene of Arthur and Miranda and Clarke having drinks where, like, other people aren't allowed into the bar, yet they're allowed to stay in the bar. Airports are 100% this, by the way. You need a boarding pass to get into some airports. Other airports and parts of airports you can just walk into. Employees can enter and exit at certain times and not others. You have to leave when your plane is due to leave. You can't stay at the airport. You have to get on the plane, right? There's a series of isolation and opening and closings. And the fifth and final function, or the fifth and final quality of the Heterotopia, is that they have a function in relation to all other spaces that remains. This function unfolds between two extreme poles. Either their role is to create a space of illusion that exposes every real space, or the sites inside which human life is partitioned, as still more illusory, perhaps that is the role that was played by those famous brothels which we are now deprived, or else, on the contrary, their role is to create a space that is other, another real space, as perfect, as meticulous, as well arranged as ours is messy, ill-constructed, and jumbled. So that every Heterotopia either highlights some aspect of a real space by producing that real space as more organized, as more neat, or it does the opposite, like a bar at 11 p.m. when everyone's drunk, or like a club or something like that. The chaos and the entropy contrasts and produces a mirror to like the organization of real life. Or it mediates real space by creating fake spaces that could never exist outside of this space. Like a museum is like a really good example. Museums are like impossibly clean, impossibly organized, and impossibly quiet by contrast to the real world, which is frequently chaotic and messy and dirty. And certainly the airport is that in different periods that we see it in, where it's obviously at the start of the collapse, it's a complete nightmare. And then it becomes one of the few spaces that are organized and safe by the time the traveling symphony get there. There's a lot of qualities that the show is interested in exploring in that regard. Okay. Pause. Thoughts, feelings?
Sorry, give me 1 second. My earphone's fucked up.
He's dying. His headset's dying. Darth?
My most interesting takeaway was that we were deprived of brothels.
Yeah, Foucault really feels like that. Like there was something in his life that was missing, and it was brothels. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know. He's like yeah. I think he just imagines that his life would be better if he had access to a brothel. I'm not sure what to do with that.
Well, yeah. I feel like a lot of like philosophers writing like in early 20th or 19th century, like just a lot of their analogies to their ideas are like sex related. Like actually, I mean, this does not fall into that category, but like Zizek, he's a modern philosopher, but all of his analogies are some sort of like sex related analogy. That guy's horny as fuck.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. That's just philosophy. You spend a lot of time indoors writing about stuff. You're gonna get up. Yeah, I bring that forward here because I think that in no uncertain terms, I can't prove that Emily St. John Mandel has read a bunch of Foucault and a bunch of Marx, and probably Derrida. I feel pretty confident in saying that she understands a lot of what the ideas that were put forward in those texts are. The fact that Miranda is in logistics and she talks about the ships, and like the ship is just this ever-present concept in Foucault's work. He's obsessed with the ship and like its place in society. We get the airport here. I don't know, man. It's all in the mix. I sort of wanted to put it forward because we mentioned heterotopias in our first episode when we talked about the world, the flesh, and the devil. And And I wanted to put it out there because I think that when we think about the airport as a central location, I think it's important to identify it as a central location that produces contrast with the rest of the world, whether that's during the collapse or after the collapse or when the traveling symphony arrives. It is a contested space that produces contrast, and that people will want to be in and out of for different reasons at different times. And that's just like an interesting thing to me, in the way that spaces, in the materialist context, produce and exert ideology. The airport is certainly one of those, and who controls the airport, therefore, has pretty large significance over what this space does. And the fact that it's Clarke, and Elizabeth and Miles, says something about the ideology this space exerts. And I'm interested in the next part of the story when we come back to the airport, 20 years in the future. Who's in charge? How has that changed how the airport is shaped? And what does that do to this space and the ideologies that it exerts versus when it was under Clarke, Elizabeth, and Miles in the moment we have in this episode?
It was interesting, the notes about like the entries not being blocked is not the right term, but you were talking about how like there's certain times that you're able to go in and out of the airport and like all this kind of stuff. And I thought it was really interesting in the next episode how they have to go through this entire underground network of the tunnel system of the pipes and everything to get into the airport instead of traveling through the front door. And I'm sure there'll eventually be some kind of reason for that, but it kind of, to me, tied into your description there, which is a lot more of a closed off system kind of thing.
Well, my implication was that they were sort of being quarantined to make sure they weren't sick, and then they would be let in or something. That was sort of how I understood why they went in that way instead of the front door, sort of thing. But yeah, that's a good point.
Something about an airport too, like the infrastructure needs to be particularly sound and organized. And you know how they're saying like, oh, this place, the Museum of Civilization, they have surveillance, they have electricity, the elevators work and all the stuff. Yeah, like it's an airport is a lucky place to have crashed during the civilization. You have a lot of resources, at your disposal. As you said, you're isolated.
It's a place no one would go. Like
place.
no one has a reason to go to it after the end of the world because you can't.
Yeah,
fly a plane.
yeah, exactly. In 20 years, who knows? Like you could maybe like learn to fly a plane. There's like a lot of like room for experimentation. I don't know. Like it's certainly a place that would become valuable in 20 years on from the apocalypse. Yeah.
And we had kind of skipped over this scene, but the reason that they have electricity is because Miles had all of these electrical panels that the airport had been planning on installing at some point, and they just hadn't gotten there yet. So they had the infrastructure for infinite free electricity that they just had to learn how to build themselves. It's not like, the electricity in this one place was still magically running 20 years later, which at first I was like, that they got to explain that one. So when he was walking around this, this hangar and there's all these electrical panels and I'm like, okay, that works.
It's that thing that Rye always talks about of like the verisimilitude. It's like, what do they do? What do they eat? What do they do for fun? And where do they sleep? And it's like, this show just answers all of that relentlessly. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you the ending of this essay because it's just an absolute banger. And again, weirdly obsessed with ships. I don't know what's going on with Foucault in this era of his life, but he's just big into ships and brothels. I'll give you this and then we can duck out for a break and then come back. So, this is how he ends the essay. Quote, brothels and colonies are two extremes of heterotopia. And if we think, after all, that the boat is a floating piece of space, a place without a place that exists by itself, that is closed in on itself, and at the same time is given over to the infinity of the sea, and that, from port to port, from tack to tack, from brothel to brothel, it goes as far as the colonies in search of the most precious treasures they conceal in their gardens, you will understand why the boat has not only been for our civilization from the 16th century until the present the great instrument of economic development, but has been simultaneously the greatest reserve of the imagination. The ship is the heterotopia par excellence. In civilizations without boats, dreams dry up, espionage takes the place of adventure, and the police take the place of pirates. Bro, fucking... Sometimes you just read Foucault and you're like, God, he could do the damn thing. You kidding me?
That is a really... It's a really good explanation of why Star Trek is so entertaining to a lot of people.
100%.
Because you are getting on a boat, you are going out into an ocean of the unknown, and you're finding what adventures await you. And you're going to find planets of brothels, and you're going to find planets of people that need help, and everything in between. And that's just really... Every space exploration movie is the same thing. You're getting on a boat, you're going out to an island you've never visited before. So I definitely see where, that's coming from, that, like, the boat symbolizes, like, so many different types of journeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Star Trek is basically just pirates in leotards, more or less, is what we're saying.
You know how, like, in shows like Star Trek or universes like Star Trek and Star Wars, like, other planets have like a homogenous culture. So I'm just imagining there's a brothel planet.
No, that fully exists. That's definitely an episode in Next Generation, because Riker, they go to this planet and he's like considering staying there forever.
Yeah.
And that's like his moral jeopardy.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah. His moral jeopardy. And then it turns out that, like, actually the sex with these people is like it's like programming him to want to stay, and it's like a Venus flytrap type situation.
Okay.
And if only he'd stop fucking these people, he could leave. He's Riker, so he can't. Next Gen's great.
Yeah, I've only seen I remember one episode where, like, everyone gets infected by a sex bug and they all want to fuck.
That happens
That's
at
one
least
of the few episodes I've seen.
in at least once in every, like, iteration of Star Trek, I think.
It's whenever viewership is going down, they got to bring out a sex episode.
They make... How far into... Are you watching Strange New World stuff?
Yes, and I'm a immense fan.
I knew you would be.
Like, the number of... I mean, it's such good storytelling aside from just liking Star Trek. I just had an episode where the Gorn come back, and one of the characters, like, her family was, like, eaten by this race of aliens, and she's having to deal with facing that part of, that trauma of her past again. And I'm just like, oh, this is so good.
She's such
so
a good
good.
character. The show fucking rules, man. Yeah. I was going to say, they do there's a lot of sex in that show. Or a lot of implied sex, perhaps, is the way to say that.
I was about to say, not yet. Not yet,
Okay,
there's
not
not.
yet.
But
Okay.
I'm gonna stay all the way.
You gotta
We'll
do
get
it, man.
there.
They make Spock horny, bro. I don't know. It's... I don't know. All right. On that note, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back to talk about episode 6 of Station 11. In the meantime, please enjoy these products and/or services. We'll be back presently.
Commercial for brothel pops up.
This post-apocalypse unit is sponsored by the Maynard Trigg series. You can find these books at undering.press. They are my science fantasy coming-of-age novels. If you like post-apocalypse fiction, I guarantee you'll like these novels. They take place in a dying world far above the earth in the skies. They are fantasy novels. They are mystery novels. They are coming-of-age. If you enjoy the things we talk about and the way we talk about them, I guarantee you'll like these novels. Use code REVIEW10 at checkout. That's REVIEW10 at checkout for 10% off the original hardback of the first novel. That's this one right here. Once again, REVIEW10 at underink.press to grab your copy of the first Maynard Trick book today.
Okay, so brief story, which is about when you are calling a kid smart and what you might actually see versus what films and TV shows try to, paint kids as being smart, actually acting like. So my brother, as like a Christmas present, got me this this wooden box that's like a puzzle box, right? And you have to push it and turn it different ways to get it to open. And he wanted to figure it out before he gave it to me so he could show me how to open it. And he spent like an hour and could not figure out how to get the thing open. So he got frustrated, left it on the counter, walked away. He comes back, it's sitting there open. And he's like, what happened? He calls the kids over. It's a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And he's like, did you open this? And the 7-year-old is like, yeah, I helped. The little brother was trying to open it. I helped him open it. And so you've got the adult that can figure out the thing. And then the kid is just instantly does the thing. And it's just interesting because we were talking about Tyler and the adults are saying, oh, you're so intelligent, and how do you depict that? And we had this, this real life example of the difference in intelligent levels of maybe how kids perceive a challenge or whatever. But my brother comes back and this thing is opened and the kid did it and no one knows how. And there you have it.
Is that a story about how smart his kid is or how dumb Eric is?
Yeah.
Because, sorry, Eric. Oh. Just saying.
Yep. Well, that's good. That's getting clipped.
You're gonna send that to the group chat.
You know what I think it is that kids are persistent. I think that's what makes them so good at like that kind of stuff. Is like they won't give up. They'll just like be like that for like an hour until they get it, kind of thing.
Yeah, they don't got anything else going on. They're not thinking about
exactly
the next bill they have to pay or like, fuck, I have to do my laundry. They just got time.
Yeah. Don't grow up, everyone.
Don't do it, man.
Life gets awful.
It's bad. It's bad out here, man. All right, let's talk about episode 6, Survival is Insufficient, directed by Helen Shaver and written by Sarah McCarran. Patrick, when you're ready, could we please hear the summary?
Kirsten tries to grapple with Alex leaving. The prophet sets fire to a sign and lays out a threat to kill the traveling symphony. And so Kirsten sets off to find and kill the prophet. Meanwhile, Alex returns to the symphony without a word. As the troop regroups, the Museum of Civilization man is back, and this time he takes them at gunpoint. Kind of. In a tense sequence, Kirsten tracks the prophet to an abandoned lake where a number of children appear and invites her to join the Undersea. Kirsten confronts the prophet. He offers her an alliance. Take him to the Museum of Civilization and he'll take her to the symphony. She reluctantly agrees. The symphony is led through a long, dark corridor to the Severn City Airport, the location of the museum. But just as they arrive, Sarah has a heart attack. Kirsten and the prophet finally have a conversation about the comic. The next morning, the kids are attacked by bandits and Kirsten kills a handful only to be surrounded. Cut to credits.
She gets trank darted, but that didn't sound as poetic of a cliffhanger as only to be surrounded. But she gets riddled.
Bro, she was dispatching them.
Dude, that action scene fucking rips, man. Every now and then the show just goes off chops. It's so good.
Yeah. Also, something about the last episode. Sorry, real quick. Did y'all notice the recruiter for the Museum of Civilization in the last episode?
No.
Yeah, so he left with Tyler's maid or whatever.
Yeah, he was the guy with the Italian accent. Yeah,
what the
right.
fuck?
Yeah,
you first see him on the airplane. Actually, he's the one that comes up and says, "Is he bothering you?" When he's talking to Elizabeth.
Oh,
yeah, he's like, "Is this man bothering you?" Yeah.
So he's,
And I did not notice, but my partner did. She's like, "Oh, I recognize that actor." I'm like, "What?" That's crazy.
crazy. That is
Yeah.
a wild detail.
Mm.
Okay, that makes
He took off the glasses, and so David didn't recognize him.
Yeah, that's man. I for real think that in real life the Clark Kent thing would work on me. I don't think I'd make the connection. Like I am face blind when it comes to glasses. And I guess he's pretending to be a weird Italian dude as well. You know, like he's in disguise.
He's got a wig on as well. Yeah, like it's like what the fuck is up with this guy? And in this episode, I think he says as well, like, "Oh, I left for a bit, but then I came back," or that's what they tell me.
I have the memories
which lines up like he did
of that.
Yeah.
What happened to him? That's a great question. Just a random side character with some crazy trauma that we don't hear about.
Yeah.
He was so traumatized.
Like
his accent
got
changed.
his mind wiped. Yeah. Got his mind wiped and doesn't remember French anymore or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Gets so traumatized he becomes not Italian. He's a weird dude though. Like, especially on the plane, like he's just her whole like little attaché is very bizarre. Like Elizabeth's little like sort of traveling, and the nanny I recognized as well from somewhere else, and I couldn't place her, but she's definitely like in a bunch of TV that I've seen. I just couldn't tell you where from. But yeah, weird. Okay, no, that's a good notepad. I did not pick up on that. This opening sequence of old Kirsten looking for Alex / Jeevan / young Kirsten looking for Alex / young Kirsten looking for Jeevan / young Kirsten, like crying and having lost the baby and stuff. This is such a emotionally affecting. Like I was genuinely moved by this. I did these episodes like not back to back, which is unusual. Like usually I try and watch the 2 episodes that we cover like one night, and then the next night I'll watch the next one. I had about a week gap, and starting on this, I was just like, I was so captivated by how this so brilliantly communicates the sense of like the way that grief and panic can kind of collapse reality in a way where like it's not clear if this thing where, you know, we get this quote unquote memory where she's talking to Gil and she's lost Alex as a baby, but actually the baby's fine. You know, it's unclear if this moment actually ever happened, or if it's just a way of the show trying to communicate the feelings that are kind of swirling through Kirsten as she sort of looks for Alex in the wake of this explosion, in the wake of Gil's death, and all these things sort of ricocheting within her mind. Is so brilliantly communicated on screen.
Yeah, because like there's something not right about the way the people are talking in this scene. Like I was so confused and like weirded out. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like this is like a Yorgos Lanthimos film all of a sudden. God damn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very evocative and strange and off-putting. Yeah. Just really great TV. And sort of set against this, we have the backdrop of the Prophet's threat. And this is some like fucking creepy stuff, guys. he sets their regroup point. He sets the big sign on fire, which is what they use to regroup at. And then they've built these like little these little graves that have everyone's names on them in the symphony. Very creepy. And
this was very Walking Dead to me. Like this is what that show gets into in the later seasons, I feel.
Yeah, it's just some Negan bullshit for sure.
Yeah.
And then Alex is back, and like I've just written in my notes, Alex is back. What the fuck?
Go back briefly, because a really interesting part I think of that whole thing of the sign on fire and the crosses, like the crosses and the graves symbolizing all the people that are going to die were made by children. You know, like Tyler is bleeding in a wheelchair. He's not the one doing this stuff, right? So it's children building the graves who are ostensibly they're threatening, we're going to kill you, even though the kids don't know that's what they're doing. They're just doing what the master tells them to. So there was so much symbolism in here that I'm like, I don't know what to think about that, but that's awesome.
Yeah, it's possible, guys. This prophet, he's not a good dude. I think that's possible, you know?
But he's got such a soft-looking face.
That's true,
Can't be
Pat.
evil.
Benefit of the doubt. We don't know.
Dart's also like, don't say anything about his appearance, because you guys are having like, you kind of have the same look at the moment. We just need to put some glasses on the prophet, you know?
Okay. What about now?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Where'd he go?
Did you lose me? Do you recognize me still?
who's this stranger that's on the Discord call? Yeah, it's very I'll reuse a phrase that is in the first episode. You know, these graves are quite, and this sign on fire, it's quite pregnant with meaning in a way that isn't clear. In a way that the show is very interested in doing, where it's like, here is something evocative. Do with it what you will. It's rarely willing to be like, here is a symbol and here's its meaning. It's just sort of going, here's something to consider. And what you said is absolutely right, that like, he's making kids do this stuff. It's quite haunting and upsetting. And this is just off the back of him literally using children to blow up Gil and themselves at the same time. You know, it's just incredibly dark.
Just because you were talking about symbolism, later on in the episode, when she is just about to get to where their secret hideout is, and she sees her horse, and it's like a bright white horse running through the dark trees, and I'm like, there's so much symbolism in this, but I don't have a clue what it's supposed to mean. And she can't catch up to it, and then she gets accosted by the kids, and nothing comes of that scene of the horse, running away through the woods. But yeah, it's like symbolism everywhere, and hopefully it'll all make sense at the end.
Well, and if nothing else,
I don't remember this horse.
You remember the horse?
No.
Yeah, she's like yelling at it as it runs past, and then she like emerges through the clearing, and there's the creepiest shit of all time, where all the kids rise up from nowhere, and she's surrounded by these kids.
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, it was her horse that Alex stole when she ran away to go join the prophet, and then Alex ends up back with the group, but the horse is there running around with the prophet's people, which is where Kirsten is.
Michael Clayton connection.
So, patreon.com/ZeroRundown if you want to hear us talk about Michael Clayton, a very good film. Yeah, that episode's up now. It's a really great listen. And also, Alex cooks potatoes the whole time. So, it's, again, something else pregnant with meaning. Yes, I don't know what to make of the horse. I mean, I think logistically it's exactly what you're suggesting, which is like, it's the horse that Alex stole. It suggests that Alex was here or somewhere close by here. But also, a white horse in like a dark forest is like a thing in like storytelling. And it's like a thing, crucially, in fantasy stories, right? The
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, the pure white horse. In Book of the New Sun, right? The destriers, the horses in that. Fantasy literature is riddled with thoughts and feelings about horses, and the place that they have in society and the things that they represent. They represent power, they represent a whole bunch of stuff. And I think this horse here is just, again, to show, like what you were saying, Darth, being like, here's a thing, it logically makes sense and tells you something about like the logistics of what's happening, but also it evokes that imagery and puts it into conversation with the moment that's happening. And if you think about it, the horse is like a method that she could use to escape the situation. Like, if you want to be really logical, it's like she could get on that horse and she could outrun these kids, but also the horse leaving, represents something about something. Like, it's like the absence or the departure of something, of like, it's a white horse, there's innocence and power and authority there, and it's like running away from her, and she's about to lose her authority in this scene. You could do those readings as well, if you wanted to.
I was going to do a fun little call back and say that horses were they were the first boats.
Dude, that's so true. Horses were the first boats, and people aren't saying that enough. People aren't saying they're not brave enough to say that horses, the original boats. Foucault would have loved a horse.
Took him to his favorite brothels.
Took him to his favorite brothels, dude. Man, if only Foucault had grown up, been born 100 years earlier, he could have been riding the horse to a brothel and been the happiest man on the planet. Sorry, Michelle, you were born in the wrong era.
I'm pretty sure at that point where she sees the horse that we have already had the scene where Alex is back with the group. Mm-hmm. So we, the audience, know that Alex is safe, but Kirsten sees the horse, and that is proof to her that Alex is somewhere nearby. Right? Even though when she finally gets to the prophet, she isn't like, where is Alex? Is she? Does she say that?
Well,
that's all.
She gets confirmation that Alex is with the group because of the flares earlier.
Yeah.
And her boyfriend or whatever is like, oh, look, see, Alex is accounted for. It's all good.
Yeah.
You remember
that? Okay, so she was just following the tracks literally to go kill the prophet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I had it in my head it was still a rescue mission.
No, she's fully set her watch to kill. She's like, this is murder time.
Also,
and she was. I mean, she was ready for murder.
Oh, big time.
As soon as she sees him, knife to the throat.
We're skipping around a little bit, but as she's like tracking them and she's walking down the trail, and you see the thunderclouds, and then she comes up on a tent.
Yeah.
Did y'all take anything from that?
The tent? I mean, I know she's sitting in the tent and she's reading the comic, and we montage between that and the troop arriving at the graves, and then young Kirsten yelling for Jeevan. It was visually stunning and quite affecting, but I didn't write anything else down.
Okay, so the problem that I have is at this point I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the way that it could be read is that whoever the prophet, it literally can see the future, knows it's about to rain, and had his people build this tent for Kirsten so that when she got to this exact point where it was about to rain, she would have shelter. That's how I read it.
What the heck?
What? I mean, there's just tents in the world, dude. That's a long bow to draw.
It was in the middle of the trail that she was walking down as she was tracking the people. They knew that she would come after them, right?
Yeah, I suppose,
why else would you...
Tent's a generous description for it. I'm looking at it now. It's like it's like a sheet on some sticks.
Yeah.
You could throw that up in
rough.
a minute.
Yeah, it's rough, but also if you're living in that world, you don't leave that stuff there. You take it with you, at least the plastic bits of it. And there is enough fantasy stuff here that we could be talking about, knowledge of the future and time travel and all of this stuff. So given all of that information,
are we sure that she didn't put it up? Rains. Did she come upon it?
No, she walks. Yeah, she walks up upon it, hears thunder, looks up at the clouds, and then the next shot is of her in the tent. And it was everything is so...
Okay, but
she didn't put it up. It was there.
It was there already. Okay.
It is too coincidental, and so that's why I'm this has to be a time travel thing, that they put it there for her. Okay. Or it's just coincidental, and I hate it.
Okay. I think it would be worse if it was because of time travel, but that's just me. I think it's probably more likely that this is just here, but I will concede that either thing is possible, and that I didn't have a problem with it.
See, okay, I thought this was going to be... Go ahead.
So she walks up to it. It's not built. It's like a pile of rubble, or the remnants of a camp. and she assembles it. Like the materials are there, but she assembles it. So I think the implication probably is that someone used it to stay the night there once, and she just happened to stumble upon it. Is how I read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be, because at the time I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of the supernatural stuff, and so like from here on out, we're gonna start seeing more of like the future is doing stuff to come into the past and blah blah blah. So yeah, that was my initial perception of that scene. So I'm glad I brought that up. Very very different reading.
I'm still pretty on the angle that there is nothing supernatural about this show. And David knows the answer. So.
I'm
I
not
was about to say,
saying.
what's your opinion, David?
I'm not saying nothing. You won't get any peep out of me. So, that was actually a really interesting. I'm glad that you fact checked that, Pat, because that's like one of those like thing. You know, like sometimes you just get like in your head and you're like, this fucking thing, and you go and look at it and you're like, oh, I just had that completely wrong. That is a good bit of fact checking. So, stunning little montage of Kirsten thinking about Jeevan when she's younger, reading the comic book, and then we get the next thing that I have is the Museum of Civilization guy coming upon the symphony with this partner that he has, but they have guns now, and this is where the troop gets properly separated from Kirsten because they're going to the Museum of Civilization, but Sarah leaves the flyer behind along with her glasses so that Kirsten will put it together. And then Kirsten sort of goes to where the kids are, which is what we were talking about before. That symbol that Darth kept hooting and hollering was a knife. The fishhook thing is like carved on all these stumps as Kirsten's like going toward this lake. So this is presumably like the lair of the prophet. And
Yes, the boat anchor.
It's the boat anchor, yeah. And then the kids, like I don't know how to describe it. So it's like there's like this gentle breeze, and Kirsten's at this lake, and she sort of walks up to it. And it's beautifully shot. Like this is just like one of the most beautiful, there's visually looking episodes of the show so far. She kind of walks up to this lake, and she sees this kind of abandoned factory in the distance, and this kid sort of appears in the middle of this field of grass, and the kid's wearing like a Dr. 11 helmet, like a fake prop helmet, and she says, "Who are you?" And he says, "My name is Dr. 11." And then like these kids just start like emerging from all these hiding places, like as if out of nowhere, and they're all kind of vaguely dressed. They have like little props on as if they're dressed up like characters from Station 11, and then they make her recite the book. And it's such a charged scene. The patience of this scene is just incredible to me. They just let it happens so slowly, and it's never clear if Kirsten is like panicking or if she's grieving or what she's feeling, and it just all kind of rushes over her face as she provides the line from the comic, which is, "My memories are the same as yours. They mean nothing."
I feel this again for the first time. I have a job to do. I found you 9 times before. Maybe 10. And I'll find you again. Until the end.
I
I always do.
find you because I know you, and I know you because we are the same.
So this episode is really like amping up the surreality, like between the opening scene where she's a young girl with Gil, and then you have the recruiter half waving a gun around, half threatening them, not really sure what's going on there, and then kids popping out of the field, coming up and sniffing her. Like that, what the heck is going on in this episode? Like what is the world logic here?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I also love this little added detail that is so unnecessary with like the older kid that gets a little bit too much characterization to the point where I was like, oh no, this kid is done for. But he he knows that this prophecy stuff isn't real, but he still wants the prophet to survive and wants him to thrive. Like, you know, at one point, like he leans into Kirsten and he's like, they like it when things sound like they're from the prophecy, which is such an eerie complication to this idea that like not all these kids are true believers potentially, and that this older kid like knows that this is all just a way that the prophet helps them regulate their emotions or helps control these kids or guides them or however you want to read what he does. I just really, really like that complication that it's not a blanket all of these kids believe. That makes it so much messier and more organic to me. And yeah, as you say, Pat, like the surreality of this episode and the kind of, I love how that scene where all the kids start popping up, it legitimately feels like a scene from like, I don't know, True Detective season 1 or something. Like it has this like, is this supernatural or is this just creepy as shit quality to it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Really, really effective.
With that older kid too, I like how there's could possibly be layers of I don't know, cult ideas going on. Like to the younger kids, he's telling them about Station 11, whereas to this kid, he may be, you know, saying some other, making up some other myth about when we get access to Wikipedia again, you know, we're going to restore the world or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct my memory, but isn't that the kid that is he has the bag of medicine?
Yeah.
And he hands her the medicine, and then that's when he says they like it when you call it magic dust or something.
Yeah, because he says like, you know, we got it from an orbital drop or something. Because
so a different way to read that might be that because he's carrying the medicine might mean that he was tasked with getting the medicine, which might mean that he's in like the inner circle, which means that he would have a completely different relationship with the prophet, and maybe Tyler just straight up tells him the truth about everything. And so it's not like he just like figured it out on his own, but does have that unique relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's also cults, right? Like cults have these different layers of truth to them, where it's like the higher up the hierarchy you go, the more access to the real truth behind the cult you tend to get, and the more seniority that you achieve, the less real the beliefs of the cult become, because you have to start to buy into producing the myth. That's sort of
you become a tier 5 donor, you know, you get access to the next book in the series, you know what I'm saying?
That's literally like a structural mechanism in that Doom 2016 reboot, where like the game has like a you know, like a glossary, like where it's like you encounter a monster and you get like a description of it or whatever. But then as you progress through the game, there's like different levels. The first one's like, you know, it'll be like you know, an imp, a dangerous quick demon that blah 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 blah. And then it's like you get like the next level that's like the, you know, the next level of unlock of that glossary. And then it's like the cult being like, you know, we pray to imps every Thursday night, da 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 da. And then the next level is like the manipulation of how they got people to do that, and it does that for all of the different elements in the story, in a way that's just like really funny and interesting. I kind of love any story that's thinking about cults like that, where it's like how do people instrumentalize other people in these cults to sort of to gain control and power and agency over people, and how do you get people to give up agency and control and power? I'm always interested in that when it comes to storytelling, and particularly stories about cults where you have to move people so far from reality, and it's like, well, yeah, the prophet's choice to choose children makes sense because that's a much easier sell than having to make doing a cult with adults seems like it's a lot more work. So he's just like, I don't know, what's the shortcut? Children, that'll do.
Yeah, speaking of adults, how did you get us involved in this?
Me?
I can't even remember
this
what your
cult.
pitch was.
Slowly.
It sounded
and
so
then,
reasonable.
yeah, it sounds so reasonable. The podcast about storytelling. No, the trick I think was I got you in both separately, and then before you knew it, you were trapped. That was that's how you do it. Get them all on your isolated. You work them like a punching bag. Now, so Kirsten confronts the prophet. She almost stabs him immediately, which I was like, I love it when a TV show is like, she's here to kill him, she's not here to chat. I'm like, yep, good. Great stuff. And the bargain is simple. He basically says, get me in. I'll pose as another actor, so we can get into the airport, and I'll take you to the symphony type of thing. So this is kind of the bargain. She very much does not want to do this, like to the point where the whole time I'm like, is she just gonna stab him? And it gets to the point where she eventually reluctantly agrees, and so the prophet and Kirsten and the kids sort of make their way toward the airport, while the symphony arrives at the museum, and we get confirmation that the Museum of Civilization is in fact Severn City Airport, which I was like, in my head I'm like, of course it was, but also like it's cool. It's a cool reveal, I feel, because you can kind of put it together.
We skipped that in the last episode at like the very end of the last one before Tyler gets blown up. You see Clarke, and he's putting together like a whole bunch of electronics on a shelf, and someone asks him what he's doing, and he says, "I'm building a museum of all of the stuff that." So we have it established at the end of the last one that the museum, assumedly, is there, because it's the only other place we've heard museum talked about, right? But it also is interesting that this thing that we keep hearing about comes from Clarke, who kind of has not really contributed anything, and yet the museum is now like the pinnacle of humanity, at least as the show is painting it.
And once again, they keep using like real products, which is odd, like unusual. Like I feel like a show would normally just make up its own thing, but it just straight up has a switch light there. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's that HBO money, dude. They got, they can just do it.
And what is his little device that has Wikipedia on it? Like, it kind of looks like an Atari Lynx, but I was like, there's no way it can be that, because it doesn't have that capability to connect to the internet, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. Let me Google it, because I don't want you guys to accidentally spoil anything. Let me see. What is the handheld that Tyler was playing with when he was in the airport? The Atari Lynx was also used by John Connor in Terminator 2.
There you go. I don't know how it can download Wikipedia pages, but...
I mean... Reminds me of Game Gear. Actually, I first thought it was a Sega Nomad. But I saw it was a Lynx with the Atari and Lynx logos removed. It's actually the second model of the Lynx, aka Lynx 2. But it was the Model 1 I was familiar with. I'm also relatively certain that the Atari Lynx 2 has the resolution to be pulling that Wikipedia page off and looking that good. So I don't know. Yeah, you were right. It's a Lynx, but I mean, it's a imagined device, Pat. It's just a TV.
In my head canon, he's modded it. He's taken out the internals and put in a new thing.
Oh god, he's one of those people that buys old Game Boys and restores them and then puts like backlights in them and sells them on.
Yeah. Disgusting.
Part of me wishes that they had gone kind of that route, because he talks about how he needed to connect to like a Russian satellite or something, and it was only overhead like a certain point of the night for him to download stuff. Mm-hmm. So like all of that like sounds awesome, but doing it on this device, no. So he would have had to jerry rig his own thing with all of this other equipment, which could have been really neat and really shown that intellect that could also lead to the prophet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, that's just a lot of work for a device. I think it's also fine to just be like, I don't know, it's a fucking whatever. You know?
This kid installed a Wi-Fi chip. He must be a genius.
He's a genius.
Well, it's also a really interesting idea that, like, what if Tyler had the world not ended? Like, he could have been a legitimate technological genius and could have revolutionized, industry in multiple ways, and he could still theoretically do that in this future, but he does not want that. He wants the opposite. He wants to kill all of the technology, but he is the epitome of, natural ability for that technology.
That is kind of interesting, yeah. I mean, it's that kind of thing where it's like, if you understand enough about a subject or a topic to be like, this is a bad thing. That's also like a way that you could read that. I think. Yeah.
Or maybe he's just megalomaniacal and he wants to be the only person who knows about that. He wants to hoard information.
It's a real Clarke maneuver if I've ever heard one. So it's some real Clarke behavior. Okay, so yeah, Kirsten accepts, so she's gonna go with him. She's not happy about it. And she's still very standoffish and obviously doesn't trust him. We get the airport reveal, like we said. Sarah has a heart attack, ? We're not quite sure, but she gets there and then collapses. I'm assuming it's a heart attack. And no one is coming to help Deirdre because they're in quarantine. So like he's yelling for help and no one's coming.
Oh, I was just assuming it was like a long elevator ride. It's
a slow
It
elevator.
had only been a minute.
Yeah. That was.
I mean, airports are big, so
yeah. I mean, I guess. Yeah.
And I had been thinking that it was like a severe cold, and she had the chills because they were out in the rain, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with her either, unless it was just like kind of a standard. I've got a bad cold, and I'm shivering, and I've got a bad fever and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, probably a bunch of things compounded, and also she was extremely nauseous because of the glasses and stuff like that.
And she was drunk previously.
Yeah. Overall distress. I can see that.
Yeah, just a lot of physical strain. Yeah. So that's sad.
And then you also skipped Kirsten when they're leaving, and he says something like, "You're just gonna have to trust me," and she like shoves her hand up his wound.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's she does not like this guy, and fair enough. Yes. So I want to talk about like I mean the real ending of this is like we get Kirsten and the Prophet talking about Station 11 finally. But one of the lies or the fiction that the Prophet is producing for these children is basically that, well, I say fiction, it could be true, we don't know, which is that he's pointing to a satellite and he's basically saying like that's that's Station 11 up there orbiting the Earth. And in my head I was like, is he just pointing to the German satellite that he was using all those years ago, potentially? Would make sense. And he's saying that he gets transmissions from Dr. 11. And what's really interesting is he I can't remember exactly what the Prophet says, but he says something about Dr. 11. And then Kirsten, like, she's like, well, that's like, she literally is like, oh, well, you just don't understand the comic. Like, I can't remember what the Prophet says, but she says that's because Dr. 11 is a kid. It's K inside the suit.
No, it's time travel. The Prophet doesn't know that it's time travel, and that the dude in the suit is repeating his own life or something like that, and that's what Kirsten tells him.
Yeah. She says it's K inside the suit, the rebel undersea leader. She's in a time loop. Yeah.
Which also, I was like, well, I didn't know that either, but I haven't read the full comic, so.
I haven't read the comic, so you can't make fun of me for not knowing.
Yeah.
Let's see. Search for time, which was stupid. I should search for loop, obviously. What is he saying?
But I loved that. Like, that idea was awesome, that he had theoretically based his entire cult off of a misinterpretation. And she could just be like, nope, I got it right here. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna show you. That's not what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, he says the blue spaceman really calmed me down. It all came to me when I needed it the most. And that's why she's like, that's because Dr. Levin's a kid, dude. I just like that idea of her being like, that's a real juvenile relationship to this comic. It's pretty fun.
Well, didn't he lose it when he was a kid, or have it taken away or something?
I think he might have let his copy perish in the plane, maybe? I'm not sure.
I had it in my head that his only memory of it was the month that he spent reading it on the plane quarantined.
That would make sense as to why he... Yeah, go on.
That just leads even more into the idea that he could have misinterpreted stuff because it's his memory as a 8-year-old or whatever. And, all of these years later, and he's trying to make up these stories for the kids, and she doesn't have it on her. It's still back at Gil's and maybe blown up because it was in that same room. But it'd be interesting had she pulled out the actual comic and gone through and showed the kids like what it actually says, but they couldn't read it because they were probably never taught to read. So that's also an interesting thought.
Wasn't Kirsten reading it when in that tent?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So she has it on
Yeah.
her.
So maybe,
still...
yeah.
There's that thing on her.
Yeah.
Of course, the ending ruins that neat hypothetical scene, but
It's true.
I agree that it could be the case that the prophet only read it in that month he was isolated, and that's why he has this warped understanding of it. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. I guess we also don't know. Oh, I guess we do. So he leaves on around day 100-ish. And they're in lockdown till day 70. So it's a good month after that, which is when he leaves. So yeah, I could see that. I could see him losing track of the comic in that time or something like that. Yeah. So I want to set up some stuff, and then we can talk about the prophet and moral relativism. So the prophet tells his little story about Miranda and Arthur, which we kind of touched on in the Miranda episode, but I thought it was really interesting the way that Tyler articulates this, where he's talking about his dad. He says, but when he was alive, he spoke Spanish, and he thought she didn't, she being Miranda. So he would have all these conversations in front of her with his dad about how selfish she was, how crazy, how he loved her, but she didn't love him, how he didn't understand her art. After she left him, she called to say that she loved him, and they had the whole conversation in Spanish. She told him he had never asked her anything about herself. God damn. I think that just is such an interesting conception for Tyler to have, because that sort of implies that he knew that as a kid as well, right? Because he left when he was a kid. So this is something he knew about his dad for some reason, or his dad's told him this or something like that. But I think it really illustrates how selfish he perceives Arthur to be. And just how blind Arthur was to the reality around him in some ways. That thing which Elizabeth says, which is everybody loved him. But ultimately no one really liked him type of thing. And I think that's a really good illustration of that.
So I'm a bit confused. He's talking about how Arthur was talking to Tyler about Miranda or Tyler's mother?
Arthur's talking to Arthur's dad on the phone.
Oh, wait, and then how does Tyler know about that?
We don't know.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, we're not sure. He's talking about his mother's first wife being an artist. His father's first wife being an artist. And that's when he tells that story. Yeah.
Which also could be entirely made up because for that to be true, then he would have had to have spoken fluent Spanish at like age 6 or whatever.
Well, we don't know how he knows it. That's
Right?
the thing. Like we don't know if this is just something that Elizabeth has told him. Like, because she's bitter about Arthur, so she probably is putting all kinds of shit in Tyler's ear about how terrible his dad is or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we just don't know how he knows this. But we know it's true because we watched him do it in the show. So however he's come to know this, it definitely was the case that this is something that Arthur did.
I did think that was interesting. The scene where Arthur's on the phone and he's speaking Spanish or Portuguese or whatever it was, and she kept looking over there, and in the back of my head, I kept thinking, like, does she understand him? But it never went into it.
Yeah. The answer is yes. Turns out. Uh-oh. Yeah. Just interesting and sort of he says, like, you know, that doesn't seem fair. And then she, Kirsten's like, I don't speak Spanish, and he says, neither do I. And then he says something in Spanish, which is just wild. And so, okay, I want to try and explain the Prophet's worldview, and I guess, like, talk about so he's like the preeminent moralist, right? So, like, his idea basically is that everything is relative, you know, to the monsters. We're the monsters. This idea that, like, your enemies are out there somewhere, and somewhere those people have enemies, and they could be you given the right context and the right situation. And he kind of comes to this worldview by watching Clarke, Miles, and Elizabeth kind of lie to gain power and authority. And so there's a way that the show complicates Tyler's worldview in that these things are true, in that, like, he goes, well, relatively speaking, like, it's like at the end of the episode when they get ambushed, like, well, if they're trying to kill you, you fucking try and kill them back. Like, that makes sense. But that at the same time, Tyler's also an extremist, right? He straps bombs to literal children. And he's, like, before this episode, eagerly hunting down anything that represents the past, to the point where he's willing to kill this entire troop of people just to get rid of these old plays that they're performing, and erase the past and get rid of prepans. And so he has this kind of, he positions himself as amoral, right? The world's ended, bad things are going to happen anyway, so I may as well do what I need to do to survive, and wipe away the past. And if everything's gonna die anyway, what's the harm in doing things my way, right? That is kind of like his worldview, as opposed to, I guess, Kirsten, who's like, survival is insufficient, right? That's the troop sort of philosophy, which is like, well, the point of life is to produce art and meaning and to reflect and look at the trauma in the eye and deal with it and be around people and help people express things and feel things. And it's something that Pat said last episode, which is like the difference between describing or being able to understand something and experiencing it, right? The troop is this thing that is about experience and emotion and art and memory and things like that, and how memory shapes us. The Prophet's like the opposite. He's like, you don't want memory, you don't want this trauma, we gotta wipe all this stuff away. We gotta live in this fiction type thing.
Because from his perspective, like, the knowledge of, like, the pre-pan world has only ever traumatized people and turned them, you know, evil and selfish and against each other. And what good is that effect that the pre-pan world has on people, you know?
It's like the idea that if you could, like, is it better to know what you've lost or to not know, and that way you don't feel loss, right? You don't, like, the fact that the older kid knows what the internet is, like, and the conversations that Kirsten and Alex have about that stuff, it's like, is it better to just not know that that was a thing, and that way you don't know what you've lost access to, kind of thing. Which
is it
I
better
think,
to never have had Instagram?
Exactly. And I think Mandel's writing is pretty clear that, like, grief is like an animating force in life, and like grief is like a central, like an important and deeply human thing. And to pretend it doesn't exist, or to take extreme effort to destroy memory, is like a thing that her work is about, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth noting that Kirsten knows what she lost as far as the phones and the internet, and doesn't care. You know, it was Alex who had never experienced that was so enthusiastic about how fantastic it was, and Kirsten was just like, Instagram was not that great, you know?
I don't know. She says I miss Instagram. She's like, you know.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I retract.
She's like, no, I kind of like the internet. Like, she's like, yeah, there was dumb stuff, and like there was some bad things, but like I kind of like it was good too. I think she's a bit more practical about it, in her kind of the way that she positions it anyway. So I did want to explain moral relativism because it will be important for the rest of our coverage, probably of this post-apocalypse unit in general. We talked a little bit last time about Lord of the Flies and this idea that like violence is somehow like that we're, you know, we could all be put in a position where like violence becomes inevitable. It's like some underlying trait of humanity as opposed to something that's socially located. And moral relativism, I think, would argue that violence isn't socially located. It's like inevitable, so you may as well use violence to your benefit. Or if violence is productive, therefore, like there's no... Things aren't good or bad. Things happen, and therefore you have to interpret them. And so this is from Ian Bell Danskin. It's an excerpt of an essay that Ian was writing about Disco Elysium on moralism, which is how I came to find it. So, moralism. Moralists, this is him, quote, "Moralists don't bother with, if you can beat him, join him. The moralist simply says, you can't beat them. Contend with the horrors of capital with radical acceptance. It is what it is. Capital is what we have to work with. Of what pragmatic use is conscience? There are two genocides on offer, one larger, one smaller. Worry not about injustice. Worry not about grief, about pain. One or the other is going to happen. Which is closer to your goal? Think in terms of sums on a ledger. No right, no wrong. Just motion towards or away from. Whatever it is you're trying to do. It's a kind of seductive joylessness. A relief from moral crisis by leaving morals out of it. Centrists don't care what's good. They care what's feasible. Which means if you make good things feasible, you can get results working with moralists. The crushing irony of the only movement that can accomplish anything good in this world being the one that does not concern itself with goodness. But to work with moralists, you must speak their language. You will have to make arguments in favor of small genocide. You will have to put yourself in conflict with people who oppose small genocide, and you will have to accept that there are arguments made by your compatriots that the shelling of Revachol from a certain point of view was productive. After all, the moralists are the ones who did it. The war crime that stabilizes a region is not to them a necessary evil. If it was necessary, it was no evil at all. Why shed tears for what needed to happen?" Now, Ian's pretty damning critique of moral relativism under capital aside, I think it's a pretty good encapsulation of the way that the prophet kind of operates. This sort of idea of like, well, if it produces and moves us toward my goal, then it's necessary, and it doesn't matter if it's evil or not. He doesn't even perceive his actions as evil. He's just like, well, it's moving us toward the thing that I think is the correct outcome. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and he's it's sort of proven by his lack of self-preservation almost. Like, you know, he seems to be pretty confident in the face of death, and and that sort of convinces Kirsten not to kill him right there and then, as well as, you know, the fact that he's like, well, if I die, you know, I'm gonna lose control of the behavior and the actions of these kids and he, you know, convinces her that they're gonna do worse things than me.
But also that his death, his death will eventually be necessary to this project because he remembers what it was like before.
So, you know, it's like, it legitimizes that motivation if, you know, if it's not, if it's proven to not be like some selfish cause. You know, it's like, yeah, makes sense to the kids, I suppose.
Yeah, and he sort of, everything is about this like pragmatic motion toward this outcome of this project that he's doing. This sort of destruction of the past or whatever. So like there is no such thing as good or bad to him. It's all just, is it of use to this thing that I'm trying to do or not?
I think it's interesting to point out that there is no end to the cycle of I remember damage, because yes, they could potentially get rid of all of the people who remember what it was like before, but now these kids are damaged because they went and killed all of these other people. So now you got to kill that generation, and it's just this whole cycle of trying to get rid of damage, which you can never do, instead of accepting and working through the damage.
And if Station 11's a time loop, and he doesn't realize that, that's exactly the same thing that's happening to him in real life. Like, he's misunderstood the book to the point where he doesn't realize it's a time loop, and he doesn't realize that what he's doing is just this inevitable cycle, right?
I was gonna say you could take the time loop out because history is a quote unquote time loop, and it's not a sci-fi thing. It's just the same events will happen every 100 years or however many 100 years, and you will have the cycles of damage, and humans don't learn, and they happen again, and humans don't learn again, and to someone else, viewing those events, it might look like it's time travel happening over and over, but and maybe that's how Tyler would interpret it, instead of just you are perpetuating your own cycle of damage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Absolutely. And I think it's more nuanced than I think it's more nuanced than like violence is bad. Which I think is like an outcome that, say, something like The Last of Us gets to, is like, well, violence is bad and you shouldn't, if someone hurts you, you shouldn't hurt them back. I think this is a lot more subtle, like you're sort of indicating there. And it's about it's also about art and the place of art in helping us to understand those, traps and quagmires that we get stuck in and those cycles that we repeat. And it's about how art helps us look that stuff in the eye and process it and deal with it. And how it like helps us shape our worldview and like what we think is good and bad, and actually forces you to have like opinions about stuff, right? Like a lot of this show is us being like, how do I feel about this? Or where do I land on this thing? Art engenders you to not be a moral relativist and to like eventually pick a side. And it's why like I find it's one of the reasons why I often argue that there's no such thing as like an objective analysis of a piece of art, because you're always bringing some perspective to it that is going to influence the way you read something, and is going to eventually force you to like have a feeling about something. And that's going to be filtered through your experiences and your understanding of the world, and then how this piece of work has elicited an emotional reaction or whatever the reaction might be. And I really like that this episode goes to the lengths to have this conversation with the prophet, complicate this character, and then the very next sequence, it's Kirsten who goes beast mode and immediately jumps into action and starts killing these dudes. And, she ends up shoving the prophet out of the way, and saving his life ostensibly, and just goes into defense mode, because this is like, and like that complicates Kirsten as well. Like we sort of take her to be on the correct side of this, she kind of proves this point, which is like she is always ready to do violence, right? She walks around with these knives. She refuses to do a performance when she's not armed. Like, she's perpetually armed with these knives. We know she's killed guys before because she has the tattoos. I don't know, like, I really like the way this complicates and sort of helps levy some weight behind the Prophet's side of things, as well as Kirsten's. Like, it's not happy to just be like, Kirsten correct, the Prophet wrong. There's more nuance to it than that.
I was going to say the same thing about The Last of Us, but it also applies here, that the whole message of being that the message being that violence always begets violence makes it sound like violence is never the answer, but like a zombie horde attacks the city and they have to use violence to save themselves. There is no other option but to use violence, and that's the same thing at the very end. If she does not fight these marauders, the red bandits or whatever they call them, red bandanas, if she does not use violence, they die. Like, there is, always a subset of people that only respond to aggression, and people want to argue that that's not the case, but historically that has always been the case, where you have to have force meet force.
Does the Prophet have something against using violence?
I wondered, because granted, it's children and he doesn't have people who could actually fight, but the initial reaction, as far as I recall, was like, red bandanas, run. And it's like, and it's hard to say if that was like, are they pacifists, or is it just literally they're children, we have no option, we have to run away?
I don't think we know yet. Like, I don't think we've got enough of his worldview on violence to sort of say either way. It's my general feeling.
But like, you get the sense that the Prophet is so single-minded about everything, about his opinions and stuff like that. And whereas Kirsten, she is super effective with violence, but she's also a well-rounded human being, and she's well-adjusted, has empathy, is not delusional. So I feel like you can tie that back to just the Prophet's incorrect reading of the Station 11, and it's because he didn't have anyone to talk to about it. He had no one to bounce ideas off, and the Kirsten's interpretation of it is the first time he's ever heard that. Like, if he had heard that earlier in his life, it could have profoundly shaped his motivation in a different way, or his worldview in a different way.
Yeah.
I think his mom even kind of not made fun of him, but questioned why he even kept reading the thing when they were in quarantine.
Yeah. I mean,
his mom was probably not the best company to talk about art with.
No. I think, the show is very interested in media literacy, right? Like, you get that whole conversation at the dinner party. And then you've got Arthur pretending to interpret Miranda's work, and the different interpretations of this comic. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's no surprise where we land on media literacy, but I think this story is like, yeah, it would help if you could read a thing and understand a thing and maybe think about a thing critically and have complicated thoughts about a thing. That might help you not become a cult leader that has children go and blow people up,
That's step one.
I think it was the dinner scene where, wasn't it Elizabeth that Arthur took into and let her see Miranda's drawings and stuff before the comic was even done?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to, like, she, years ago was complimenting how amazing the product, or how good the art is, but then when her child is consuming the art right in front of her, she's critiquing it instead of, like, she was an actress, like, she enjoys art to some degree, and she was not trying to connect with him over the art.
Well, I think the thing she freaks out about specifically is that he's like memorizing it. She's like, "What are you doing?" Like he's like muttering the words to himself as he tries to onboard it into his brain. But yeah, I agree. I think that's like interesting and like complicated and weird. And it's like she's a different person having been being married to Arthur. Like she completely changed her. Like the Elizabeth that we saw before the marriage to Arthur is like empathetic and thoughtful. And then when we meet her like on the plane, she's like dismissive and mean, and she's only interested in herself. Like you know, she's changed a lot in that time period, and become very very sort of insular and you know, isolated in her worldview. And yeah, just interesting to note. Not sure what to do with that.
Which I had read that as a consequence of her becoming a famous actress, which may have been a result of being married to Arthur. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah.
But that it seemed much more of I am a big deal, not I'm married to a big deal. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's really, I had not thought about that before. That is actually fascinating. Yeah, and I guess the other complication this produces for for like the story in general is we kind of don't know how she ended up this way or why. Like to your point, like we're not sure what actually made her this way, but it kind of doesn't matter because it's about the outcome of that, and it's about the lessons that that Tyler does and doesn't take from, you know, being close to his mother and growing up and experiencing the end of the world surrounded by these people. He gets to see who they really are, which is people that are willing to lie and to manipulate, to, you know, keep themselves in positions of power. And he kind of looks at that and finds it unsatisfactory. You know, it's a real, like, that moment when you realize your parents are people. But for Tyler, it's like the most fraught and freighted version of that at the end of the world.
A lot of this is very much stuff that I would harp on that probably other people wouldn't even pick up. But are they the Ren bandanas, or am I just making that up?
That's a thing that used to exist. We don't know for sure if this is them, but probably, yeah. I think the red bandanas got wiped out at some point in the past. Doesn't really matter.
Okay, so if that's who attacks them, my immediate thought was I don't understand like the logistics of how the Prophet's cult has been able to survive in this world where they're pretty immediately attacked and obviously have no defenses whatsoever. Like, we quickly see that Kirsten is able to hold her own, and had she been with her troop, who also, like, we've seen that they set guards out and stuff like that, so they are aware of the need for security, and they you know, potentially had their own weapons, so they could also fight. But the Prophet's cult has none of that, and so how have they been able to survive? And I mean, maybe they just run away all the time, but I don't know.
Maybe there are other canny ways he negotiates with them. Maybe like gives them kids as tribute, as payment or something. Who knows? Some clandestine method, definitely.
What I kind of would have liked, which would have solved another problem for me, is if you like quadrupled the number of kids that are there. Because that's what I said when Kirsten is surrounded by the kids and they're like, you know, quote the book or we're going to kill you. And I'm like, there's not that many of them and you are a good fighter. You're fine. But if there were 400 kids, she's toast, you know? And so it would be the same thing for these marauders who attack them at the end. If there are hundreds of kids, it doesn't matter that the marauders have like one gun and then a bow and arrow, and, you know, like they are outnumbered and they could be swarmed by the kids. So if you change just the number of cult members, then you could make the entire thing be more realistic, even though now you have the, how do they feed themselves and all of this kind of stuff.
At least once a day, Darth thinks about how many kids he could take on in a fight.
12.
It's the
just a number ready to go.
Yeah, everyone else is doing the 100 men versus an ape, and I'm doing one me versus.
How many kids? Yeah. I mean, look, it didn't bother me at all, and I also think that you can do things to make this work for yourself, right? You can be like, okay, well, maybe the kids that are here aren't his entire cult. Like maybe he has kids out in the field. I assume stealth is a big part of how they survive. If you're a small number of people and you move quietly, that's like a good way to not get got. We also don't know to what extent Tyler is willing to do violence. We certainly know that he steals kids and he's willing to blow people up, so it's possible that like it's just guerrilla warfare is how they've survived. As to how they got in this moment, I don't think we know, and I think that's like, I think this is just a thing that happens. Like you just get raided by people sometimes. You have to deal with it. We don't know how many kids he's gone through. This could be batch number 20. You know what I mean? There's also a possibility that he hasn't survived easily, and it's been a series of compromises. And also, people don't want to kill kids. Like, it's a fucking genius thing to do. Is like surround yourself with a cult of children. Kirsten doesn't want to kill kids. Like, you know what I mean? There's also that added sort of social element of people don't want to kill these children. So it gives him, and he's surrounded by children,
The first person shot is that the older one. So it's not one of the young kids. So potentially you could make the argument that the story is saying what you're saying, that they don't want to go after the young kids. So they're a bit of a shield in that sense. I think the reason that this stuck out to me so much is because this cult is painted as the de facto big bad, right? And so this is the biggest threat in the world, and we get that sense like 20 minutes before this end scene, and all of a sudden they're destroyed. Like their whole cult is just wiped out by like 4 adults. And so now I'm like, okay, they're not the big bad anymore. And I think that's why I've got a problem with how that scene played out. And now I'm like questioning, how did they survive? How did they become the big bad if they could be wiped out that easily?
Well, they're the big bad to the symphony in this moment, right? Like, I think that within the contours of this story, it's about the ideological opposition that the cult has and the threat that they present to the troop, specifically because of the way that the troop operates and the fact they don't have anywhere where they can hunker down and they're always traveling. Like it makes them exposed to this threat. And also my feeling is like this isn't going to wipe out the cult. Like I don't think that's where this is going. I'm not sure where it's going because I don't fucking remember the next episode, but I'm pretty sure that like there will be this isn't the end for this cult. And yeah, I don't know what this is trying to say yet. But I understand what you're saying. It's just not an issue that I had necessarily. Yeah. I was just having a great time with the action scene.
Yeah, I was too. But going back and thinking about it, and it was like you introduce Bane, but then have someone come up and beat Bane until he's unconscious, and now I'm like, I'm supposed to still be scared of Bane, but they just run him off,
I think the people don't want to kill children thing is the best explanation, because I can imagine Tyler, like people pointing guns at him and then holding up a kid. You wouldn't shoot this kid, would you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that would work. I'd be like, nah.
If you haven't seen it, there's a fantastic Key and Peele sketch where the two dads are fighting, and then one of them finds out, oh, you've got a baby strapped to you. I'm not fighting a kid with a baby, and then he just keeps strapping more and more babies to him so he can smack talk the other guy, and he can't get hit because he keeps having babies all over him.
That's great.
That it does sound like a Key and Peele sketch.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We solved it for you, Darth. You're welcome. Human children shields. Done. Boom. We did it.
My only other note was just a question of when you guys tracked that the attack was about to happen.
When I saw the person in the tree, I thought it was part of the cult and that they were trying to ambush.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Kirsten.
thank you. Because like I saw that, and it was like a good minute where they're still having a conversation, and I'm sitting here thinking, why is the prophet up in a tree? And then it was, why did the prophet just shoot them with an arrow? Is he trying to prove something? And then, oh, that's not him. So I felt really, I don't know.
That's funny.
I didn't know what to think about. Yeah. So I was like, I know that I can identify a threat, but I don't know that I don't know how to identify that it is a threat. So I'm just going to stand there and let them shoot arrows at me while trying to figure out why they're doing it. I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
That is pretty funny. Not an issue that I had. Plus, I remember the one thing that I remember about this TV show very vividly is this action sequence, because it was like when I first saw this, I was like, oh my god, like Kirsten killed like 5 guys in like an instant. It's just devastating with those knives, dude. Like, and then my follow up thought was, she's gonna have to get a bunch more tattoos.
Yeah. But no, the absolute single thing that I remember, damage.
Very good.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. I was kind of like, it's gonna be something, and I didn't get there quick enough. I should have. That was a pretty short walk in the end. All right, I think that's an episode of the show. I think we did it. We tried to, we did all kinds of stuff. We talked a lot about murdering children, which was not on my bingo card for today, but I mean, it just sometimes sneaks up on you. Lovely.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I think that's it. You guys got anything else?
Nope.
I'm looking forward to getting to pick up the next couple episodes. Figure out if
this was really hard to not keep going this time. Like I was like, especially the cliffhanger. Yeah.
She just pushes Tyler down a hill and like we never see him again, and I'm like, what if there's like alligators at the bottom or something? We don't know.
Or he just like lands and hits his head and dies, like some real mundane.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there goes the plot.
I wouldn't put it past the show.
No, I honestly wouldn't either. Okay, well, that's it. Good stuff. Plugs, Patrick, where can people find you on the internet if they wish to consume more?
Well, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. A Method to the Madness is what our podcast is called. We have a website, amttm.com, stands for A Method to the Madness. You can find all our socials and our episodes from there.
Do it. Love it. And Darth, I don't know, what have you got coming? I mean, I know what you've got coming up, but tell the people, is there something that's on the immediate horizon, or are we still a ways off with the 2 essays?
One of them is about how Palpatine rose to power, and the reason that it's taking so long to write both of them is because I am delving so much into like real world stuff that I'm having to actually do research, which I'm very unaccustomed to. Mm-hmm. So like just this one essay, it's only like 40 pages, but I've got 93 different sources. So if you could picture, like every time you find a source, you have to find it, you have to read it, and then figure out how to integrate that into the work, and then figure out how to make sure that you're, quoting it properly and putting it in your source section and all this stuff. So it takes so much more time than if I'm just looking at a scene and going, Padme did this,
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to go back to that. That was so much easier.
Academic work hard to do, but good to do. A good thing to do. Yeah, that Sherlock book seems like it's real breezy, but fuck me, that was a lot of work. Yes. No, that's they're both. You listen. Both of the essays are really good ideas. Go check it out, YouTube. Darth. Otherwise, it'll be linked down below. I promise next episode I'll update your nameplate. I forgot to do it on this scene. My bad.
I would never have noticed.
I know.
I would never have noticed.
I noticed as I was saying it. I was like, fuck. I did it on the Patreon one, but not this one. Anyway, if you made it this far, you already know what it is. Patreon.com/zeroindent to support us, where you can gain access to the Patreon bonus episodes of this very show, where for every 2 episodes of this, there's a Patreon bonus that goes up. I think the Patreon bonus for the next little section here is us. We're going to watch David Tennant's Hamlet. I actually need to send you guys a link to that because I managed to find us a copy. So we're watching Hamlet and talking about it and trying to figure out what the fuck Shakespeare was. What was he saying with all these soliloquies? What was he? God, what Hamlet's always talking. What's he saying? So we covering that, and I assume really putting Darth out of his comfort zone and making him listen to a bunch of old people talk things in Old English. And who knows? Maybe I'll convince Eric to jump on. Because I feel like he'd be a fun guest.
He would. Yeah, he would love that. I'm just gonna pretend it's like a Doctor Who offshoot, and that'll get me through it.
That'll get you through it, yeah. This is the most amount of cope. Actually, like, Eric or Sam would be great, because they're both English majors, so they'd both kind of be in the right realm. We'll see. We'll get someone on, but it'll be good fun. You can go to patreon.com/zeroindent. To support us, even if you just give us a follow on Patreon, that helps us out. It helps more people find the show. And wherever you consume this, whether it's YouTube, I know most of you, it's on the podcast catcher of your choice. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us out. It helps more people find the show. We don't do any advertising. And I don't make you listen to any stupid ads halfway through this show. You don't have to, we go for a break. You don't have to listen to someone sell you a supplement or a mattress or whatever the hell. So any support you can give us, we really appreciate. You can find all of our merch at underink.press. And we now have some Zero Indent merch, which I've got sitting right in front of me. I still need to give Patrick his. The Zero Indent tee, which has our new kind of catchphrase on the front. It's really hard to do because it's blocking my view of my own screen. Oh, I can look at it on OBS. And then on the back, of course, we have this really fun artwork about real large fiction studies from the end times. So this is our shirt for this unit. You can go find that at underink.press. And I'm in the process of making that into a hoodie as well. Go grab yours today. It helps support the show, and you get a cool thing that is a fun, good thing to do for us. Help support us. So that'll do it. We will catch you guys next time to talk about episodes 7 and 8 of Station 11 as we approach the end of this show. And I guess I'll say it here because there's no real reason hiding it. We sort of threw out the schedule a little bit, and we've decided that when we finish this, we want to keep on our sort of Emily St. John Mandel kick. So after we finish the Station 11 TV show, we're going to be reading the 2 follow-up novels written by Emily St. John Mandel, starting with The Glass Hotel and then Sea of Tranquility. So if you're a bit of a slower reader, you can make a head start now on Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I think those are going to be really, really fun units for us. I'll give you guys the stopping points of those when we finish our recording next time if you want to get a head start. So that's a bit of fun, bit of sizzle for you. Otherwise, we will catch you in the next episode. And as always, it's just the end of the show. It's not the end of the world. Zero Indent is an independent publication dedicated to studying works of genre fiction, brought to you by our subscribers. Head to patreon.com/zeroindent to learn more and consider supporting us. Our theme song is The Swan by Alon Peretz. Our podcast cover art is by Crystal Hatay. Everything else is written, directed, and edited by me, DC McNeil. You can find our merch and books at underink.press and everything we do at zeroindent.com.